Chapter 43, Battling 3 Infinity Stones. Thanos stiffened for a heartbeat, then forced himself to calm. He channeled the raw power of the purple gem on the Infinity Gauntlet, one of the universe's most primordial and devastating forces, enough to shake entire star systems. Just as he prepared to unleash it, a blinding scarlet beam burst from the destroyer warsheep's helm. It was the Reality Stone, its crimson light warping truth itself. The two energies met in midair with a cataclysmic roar, ripping at the very fabric of space. The universe seemed to cry out as reality itself buckled under the ferocity of their clash. Thanos reacted in less than a femtosecond, instantly recognizing that the Reality Stone was neutralizing his Power Stone's assault. A flicker of surprise crossed his dark eyes before he steeled himself with iron resolve. In one fluid motion, he twisted his wrist, raised his gauntleted hand, and spread his fingers wide, as though he intended to grasp the entire cosmos in his palm. A titanic surge of cosmic energy roared from the Infinity Gauntlet like an enraged dragon, poised to obliterate everything in its path. It formed a devastating shockwave that slammed into the destroyer warsheep. But the warsheep did not flinch. Divine power churned through its form like molten lava, searing, relentless. When the cosmic beam struck its energy barrier, the shield shattered as easily as a hot knife through butter. The warsheep's metallic hide shimmered with godly radiance, and its eyes burned like twin suns, alive with unbridled fury. In a heartbeat, it tore through the remnants of the shockwave and hurtled straight at Thanos. Its colossal body traced a perfect arc through space, an ominous meteor tearing across the void, every fiber of its being intent on destruction. As it closed in, its massive fists coiled with power, sucking the surrounding air into a deathly vacuum around the mad titan. An oppressive silence fell, so complete that not even starlight could penetrate it. It was as if the very breath of life had been drained from the cosmos, leaving only pure, unstoppable devastation in its wake. Ethan's left hand, encased in the Infinity Gauntlet, curled into a fist. The 6 Infinity Stones embedded in its metal gleamed like the brightest stars in the cosmos, each one humming with unimaginable power. With a roar, Thanos swung that gauntlet down against the charging destroyer warsheep. The instant they made contact, the entire starfield quaked. Distant suns flickered and dimmed, as if the universe itself recoiled at the collision. A shockwave rippled outward, driving Thanos back several paces until the void beneath his boots cracked and splintered under the strain. He could feel the raw might surging from the destroyer warsheep, an energy even he had never encountered before. A slow, dark smile curled on Thanos' lips. Far from unnerved, he found himself invigorated by this new challenge. His muscles coiled like a predator ready to strike again. "Interesting," he murmured, voice low and hungry. "Very interesting." At that moment, Thor seized the opportunity to cast off the Mind Stone's grip that Thanos had forced upon him. He awoke like a lion roused from slumber, fury blazing in his eyes. The indignation of having nearly been controlled only reinforced his power as the god of thunder, now unruly and explosive, like a wild stallion finally unbridled. "Thanos!" Thor bellowed. In a single motion, he became a living bolt of lightning, charging forward with Stormbreaker in hand. The axe shone with such blinding brilliance it seemed capable of ripping the very air apart. But Thanos didn't even turn to meet him. He felt the thunderstorm roiling within Thor, an energy so violent it might shatter worlds, but he remained eerily composed. His attention was fixed instead on the towering figure of the destroyer warsheep, the true threat on this battlefield. Around them, the wind shrieked like a primal beast, tearing through the fractured sky and threatening to rend Asgard itself. Ethan watched the ground quake, not from some distant quake or restless heart of nature, but from the raw collision of two cosmic titans, Thanos and Thor. From the epicenter of their confrontation, yawning chasms ripped open the earth like furious scars, twisting and swallowing every inch of once fertile land. What had been Asgard's radiant splendor now lay in tatters, its great continents collapsing like sheets of paper and turning to dust that scattered on the wind. Those drifting motes carried both the memory of a proud realm and the terrible proof of this decisive battle. The power radiating from the two combatants was beyond imagination. Every blow was like the collision of stars in the black void, Each impact unleashed a storm of energy that roared through the air like a dragon unchained. Thunder crackled around Thor as he channeled the fury of the skies, while Thanos stood unmoved, his gauntlet blazing with the power to rend galaxies. Where their forces met, the very fabric of reality wavered, and Ethan could only stand at the brink, awestruck by the cosmic might at play and praying that this cataclysm would not consume everything he held dear. The rift didn't just tear apart space, it scrambled magnetic fields and sent the surrounding starfield into utter chaos. Gravity itself wavered, and distant suns spun wildly as if untethered. From across this tumult, Thanos stretched out his gauntleted hand. Cosmic power, drawn from the depths of the universe, swirled into his palm and coalesced into a blinding shockwave, an energy beam capable of shattering planets. That searing beam lanced the sky, its destructive aura sweeping across the battlefield in an instant. Yet Ethan stood his ground, unwavering. He narrowed his eyes and gripped his battle axe, channeling every spark of thunder and lightning between heaven and earth into its blade. With a fierce roar, Ethan charged straight at Thanos. His axe, crackling with raw power, cleaved through the shockwave as effortlessly as a knife through silk, splitting it cleanly in two. In the next heartbeat, he was upon the mad Titan. Boom! The unleashed energies detonated across Asgard's fragile surface, as though the world itself were collapsing in that single, cataclysmic moment. A hurricane struck without warning, tearing across the battlefield as wind-driven debris and dust coalesced into a towering wall-like storm that blotted out the sky. Chunks of rock whirled through the air like living projectiles, mercilessly slamming into anything in their path. A thick dust cloud rolled outward, plunging the combat zone into utter chaos. Yet this violent upsurge was only the opening salvo. Above the storm's rumble, thunder clashed with crackling cosmic rays, unleashing an ear-splitting roar. For a heartbeat, the energies clashed and recoiled, and then erupted outward like a volcanic blast. The shockwave rent earth and air alike, shredding the landscape into fragments and warping reality itself, as time and space seemed to collapse in on one another. Chapter 1044, Split the Power. At the very heart of the explosion, Thor hefted his battle axe and swept aside the churning smoke and dust. Lightning crackled around him, illuminating his massive form like a war god born of the storm. With a thunderous roar, he brought the axe down in a savage stroke aimed at Thanos' head. Thanos merely snorted in contempt. Clenching the Infinity Gauntlet into a fist, he rammed its power against the haft of Thor's axe. The impact unleashed a searing arc of energy, galactic in scope, that blazed across the battlefield, turning night into day and flooding every hidden corner with blinding light. The air shrieked as the force rent it apart, and reality itself seemed to buckle and groan under the strain, a grim herald of hell's gates yawning open. Then, with an earth-shaking boom, both combatants were hurled backward as if struck by some unseen titan. They flew through the air in wide arcs before finally landing and regaining their footing. Standing a few dozen yards apart, battered but unbowed, they faced one another once more, the crackling glow of the gauntlet and lingering flashes of lightning casting them in stark relief against the ruined wasteland of the battlefield. Lightning flashed across Thanos' armor as Thor's golden hair whipped wildly in the gale. His eyes burned with unyielding fury. With a roar, the god of thunder swung his massive axe again, its very blade humming with destructive force. Thanos' expression went ice cold. No longer holding back, he moved with terrifying precision. As Thor drove forward, Thanos sidestepped in an instant and unleashed his right fist like a thunderbolt, connecting squarely with Thor's elbow. The sickening click of bone echoed through the battlefield as Thor's arm buckled. Before Thor could recover, Thanos struck again, then again, each blow a hurricane of power capable of wiping out entire worlds. The air whistled with fist-driven windstorms. Thor was forced backward, his heavy steps cracking the ground as though even the earth trembled before Thanos' wrath. Finally, with a sharp crack in the shifting rubble, Thanos seized his moment. He closed the distance in a single stride, clamped his left hand around Thor's head like an iron vice, and gripped the belt at his waist with the right. In one fluid motion, he hoisted the wounded god overhead as easily as if he were a rag doll. Thor's legs thrashed, but Thanos' restraints held him fast. With a guttural snarl, Thanos hoisted Thor onto his shoulder and slammed him into the ground. When the dust cleared, only a yawning crater remained. Shockwaves buckled the earth around it, sending cracks spidering outward. But Thanos wasn't finished. He raised the Infinity Gauntlet, the Power Stone blazing like a miniature supernova. Clenching his fist, he pummeled Thor's face. Bam! 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 Each blow landed like a falling star, shattering the air with explosive force, rippling through the battlefield, as if reality itself quivered. Through the onslaught, Thor never relented. He fixed Thanos with a fierce, unyielding glare, eyes aflame with defiance. Every strike seemed to ignite a deeper reserve of strength in him. Then, on Thanos' final, devastating swing, the Mad Titan overextended. Thor seized the moment, locking his hand around the gauntlet-clad wrist. In that heartbeat, power met will, and neither man would let go. Thanos' eyes flashed wide with disbelief and astonishment, as though his very soul was being swallowed by crashing waves. He had witnessed the birth and death of galaxies, the cycle of life and rebirth countless times, and yet he had never imagined anything as incredible or as irrational as this. Before him, Thor's hands, strong as Odin's own forged steel, were prying open the fingers of the Infinity Gauntlet, the artifact that glowed with insatiable hunger and power. Between them blazed the light of the Power Stone, a purple sun radiating raw energy that rippled through space like a shockwave. Stars trembled at its force. And yet Thor bore it up with effortless ease, the gem's might unable to withstand his strength. In the original course of events, Thor had once charged the fully armed Thanos, wielding all 6 Infinity Stones, single-handedly. Now, faced with a Thanos who possessed nothing but this one gem, his confidence only deepened. Anger and frustration boiled in Thanos' chest. How could the once proud Mad Titan be thwarted so readily? His grip on the gauntlet tightened, but it was no use. Thor simply flexed his fingers again, the gauntlet cracking under the pressure. Every fiber of Thanos' being screamed protest against the impossible scene unfolding before him. Yet he could not stop it. He could only watch in rage as his ultimate weapon began to fail him, and pray that he might still find some way to turn the tide. Ethan had surpassed his former self by leagues, stronger, wiser, almost godlike in power. Yet none of it was enough to crush Thor. A fierce frustration burned inside him, swelling with every failed strike. He had never felt so impotent, so utterly humiliated. Then, with a crack that split the silence, Thor's fallen form erupted in blinding light. Lightning coils danced across his skin, each bolt humming with raw, destructive force. The ground around him blackened, and the air took on the bitter tang of burning ozone, as if the very atmosphere had ignited. Thor's eyes glowed a fathomless blue, deep and mercurial, as though the storm itself raged just beneath his flesh. Muscles rippled under the lightning's glow, every taut blue vein proclaiming his insatiable thirst for power. With a roar that shook the heavens, a pillar of thunder launched skyward, cleaving the clouds and illuminating the stratosphere. The thunderstorm's energy wove into a colossal, crackling net overhead, shredding the surrounding vapor into drifting fragments. It was a spectacle that could awe the entire cosmos, a living testament to Thor's mission to purge the world of all it deemed wicked. Ethan stood at the heart of the ravaged plain, the roar of thunder pulsing through his chest like a war drum. Above him, the storm clouds peeled back in concentric rings, like an eyelid opening to reveal a single unblinking eye, its gaze so vast and ancient it seemed to pierce the very fabric of space. Even Thanos, standing nearby, couldn't hide the tremor in his voice as he whispered, "What power is this?" Boom! A surge of raw energy ripped through the sky, shattering the ambient magnetic field. Gusts of hurricane-force wind whipped jagged sheets of sand and dust into the air, blotting out everything beyond a few feet. Ethan felt the ground shudder beneath him, as if the earth itself were buckling under the onslaught. Far to the west, a distant continent heaved and bucked like a small boat on an angry sea. Waves of mist and ash slammed into jagged cliffs, sending titanic plumes of foam skyward, as though the ocean itself threatened to swallow the land whole. Shoreline creatures, powerless against such cataclysmic forces, fled inland in panicked throngs. Meanwhile, the thunderbolt's relentless barrage pummeled the mountain ranges on the horizon. Pillars of rock fractured and tumbled down steep slopes in roars of cracking stone, each avalanche kicking up towering clouds of smoke and dust. In that moment, with the sky's ferocity bearing down on them, Ethan clenched his fists, determined to stand his ground against whatever unfathomable power had descended upon the cosmos. A titanic gust of wind ripped across the battlefield like a furious dragon, its howl laden with the promise of utter annihilation. The force was so immense that even the fabric of reality seemed to shudder. From the very heart of that raging storm, a lone figure sprang forth. Thor, the thunder god, his colossal axe gleaming in the tumultuous light. Chapter 1045, Destroyer Armor Thor. Thor's muscles coiled like steel cables. He stood unmoving, a mountain of resolve. Both hands gripped Stormbreaker, the battle axe forged to rend stars themselves, as though he meant to sever every barrier between heaven and earth. With a roar, he swung the axe in a brilliant arc, its edge trailing sparks like a falling meteor. Then, with raw, unmatched power, Thor launched himself forward. His target was Thanos, the mad titan, seemingly impregnable, in the very center of the war-torn field. Rather than dodge, Thanos met the attack head-on. He slowly raised his right hand, the Infinity Gauntlet gleaming with ominous purple light, as if it were the beating heart of the universe itself. Bang! Stormbreaker collided with the gauntlet in a thunderous explosion of energy. Blinding light erupted in every direction, illuminating the shattered ground and twisted wreckage of the battlefield. From Thanos' palm, torrents of violet power, imbued with the raw fury of the Power Stone, surged along the axe's blade, searing Thor's arms and shoulders with savage force. Even a god felt the crush of that energy, the pressure that could flatten mountains and extinguish stars. Still, Thor would not yield. He tightened his grip, driven by equal parts fury and determination. Sparks danced where metal met cosmic might, and each pulse of energy threatened to overwhelm him. But Thor pressed on, unbowed. In that clash of titans, the very fabric of reality quaked. And there, amid the blinding light and cacophony of thunder, the fate of worlds hung in the balance. Ethan's latent god of thunder power suddenly surged to its zenith, as if the heavens themselves had answered his summons. Thunder rolled across the sky while crackling energy coalesced around him. He unleashed a mighty roar that echoed with the crackle of lightning, and jagged bolts danced like living serpents through the air, entwined with a savage violet glow. Where thunder met purple energy, the air shuddered, each collision erupting in deafening peals of thunder and rippling distortions in space itself. Drawing on the raw purity of his thunderous gift, Ethan steadily quelled the violet onslaught, denying Thanos' power all purchase. Even the Mad Titan's cold, impassive mask flickered with pain. He staggered, eyes wide with fury and disbelief. After mastering the 6 cosmic laws and birthing his body into near perfection, Thanos had believed himself invulnerable to both physical and mystical assault, until now. At that moment, Thor's crackling, majestic lightning struck true, and for the first time, Thanos tasted real pain. It was a scorching agony that tore through his bones and lacerated his soul, forcing him to recognize the true strength of his opponent. Thanos froze in shock. Never before had he found himself on the defensive. Determined to reclaim the advantage, he banished all hesitation. Clenching the Infinity Gauntlet, the embodiment of ultimate cosmic power, he summoned every ounce of his will. Instantly, the 3 embedded stones, the Mind, Space, and Power Stones, ignited with blinding brilliance, as if the very essence of the universe had been compacted into this single moment. The Mind Stone flared first. Its hidden tendrils slithered deep into Thanos' consciousness, excavating his most relentless convictions and deepest desires. Under its influence, his resolve expanded without bounds. In that charged stillness, he believed, beyond question, that his power was limitless. Ethan stood unshakable, convinced that no matter how daunting the challenge, or how formidable the opponent, his unwavering will and strength would carry him to victory, and ultimately make him the undisputed master of the universe. A fierce light burned in his eyes, a near-fanatic confidence that seemed to make the very cosmos tremble at his command. Then he unleashed the full power of the Space Stone. Instantly, reality itself began to bend. Voids folded in on themselves, planar cracks fractured the fabric of existence, and the world warped as though invisible hands resculpting it to his desire. With this absolute control over space, Ethan became a phantom in battle, untouchable, slipping through enemy attacks as if he were never there. At the same time, he gained endless opportunities for counterstrike, teleporting to any point on the battlefield in a heartbeat, or yanking adversaries into the extra-dimensional rifts he'd torn open, consigning them to isolation and defeat. Next came the Power Stone, the most furious and direct of the Infinity Stones. Its raw energy surged through him, propelling Ethan's might to unprecedented heights. With both stones in his grasp, his strength and dominion over the universe were complete, unyielding, unstoppable, absolute. Energized by the gem, cosmic power churned within Thanos like molten magma unleashed. His muscles bulged beneath the onrushing surge, and every inch of his skin seemed charged with the force to rip stars apart. A suffocating aura radiated from him, warping the very fabric of space. The air compressed so tightly around his form that it felt nearly solid, creating visible waves of distortion. From Thanos' outstretched frame, swirling vortexes of wind tore outward in all directions, miniature hurricanes that sucked up dust and shattered stone, each one an embodiment of his wrath, obliterating anything in its path. Locking eyes with Thor, son of Odin, Thanos spoke with icy resolve. "You have fought well, Thunderer, but now your defiance ends." He began to raise his gauntleted fist for the final, crushing blow. At that moment, the destroyer Warsheep, Asgard's ancient guardian, sensed the sudden spike in power. Refusing to be outmatched, it too began to transform. Ethan watched in awe as a flash of crimson light ignited across the ancient suit of armor. In an instant, the long-dormant destroyer, sealed away in Odin's vault for centuries, roared back to life. Fashioned by the All-Father himself, this divine war machine carries the gods' blessings and untold power, like a slumbering titan finally awakened. Bound by its pact with Thor, the armor launched itself through the air without hesitation. Thor did not shrink from it. If anything, his eyes blazed with renewed ferocity. He knew that before him stood a foe as relentless as Thanos. Only absolute commitment would do. Spreading his arms wide, he welcomed the celestial might descending from Asgard. "Come, Destroyer," he cried. In the next heartbeat, the armor fused to Thor's body as though it were part of him. Helmet, breastplate, and greaves melding seamlessly to his form. Nestled at the crest of his helm, the reality gem shone like a burning star, its light dancing across the divine metal. With the combined force of the god's blessing and the reality gem's power surging through him, Thor's strength leapt to unprecedented heights. Chapter 46. No need after defeating Asgard. The destroyer was fashioned from Uru, the near-indestructible metal of Asgard, capable of tearing apart any force in existence. Yet it was far more than a mere war machine. Embedded with advanced programming and sophisticated battle algorithms, it could assess the ebb and flow of combat on its own, selecting the optimal strategy in an instant. Alternatively, when linked to a wielder's will, it acted as a direct extension of their power, amplifying every thought and command. This phenomenal strength originated with Odin, All-Father of Asgard. He poured a portion of his divine essence into the destroyer's core to drive its operations. Other gods lent their power as well, Neptune, Lord of the Seas, and Athena, Goddess of Wisdom, among them, each contributing a fragment of their divinity to the Uru plates. When Thor slipped into the armor, his own thunder-forged energy merged with the lingering spark of Odin's might. The two sources of power fed into each other, propelling him to new heights. In that moment, Thor felt an unprecedented surge of energy coursing through his veins, an overwhelming force so immense it felt as though the weight of the entire cosmos pressed upon him, and yet he bore it as effortlessly as a summer breeze. As Ethan's power surged, he felt the strength of Earth's other gods flooding into him, coalescing into an indescribable, chaotic force. In that moment, he became something more than himself, an incarnation of the universe, omnipotent. Lightning arced at his command, storms gathered at his whim, and even time and space seemed malleable beneath his will. Visions of the future flickered before his eyes as easily as daydreams. Yet such a colossal outpouring of energy demanded a price. Ethan's battle axe trembled violently in his hand, its haft quaking under the strain. On the steel blade, a web of fine, glass-like cracks began to radiate outward. From those fractures spilled a blinding, almost holy light, an omen that spoke of both ruin and rebirth. Watching from a short distance, Thanos sensed the shift in power. He could feel the weight of Ethan's divine might eclipsing even his own. Left with nothing but the raw power of 3 Infinity Stones, he realized with a grudging awe that he faced a new force in the cosmos. The new God King of Asgard? Thanos muttered, his voice tinged with both reluctance and admiration. Ever since the dawn of their race, the Asgardians had defied expectation, performing miracles that kept the balance of the universe and threatened it. Now, with Ethan standing at their head, that ancient power had reached heights none could ignore. Ethan watched from afar, heart pounding. If Asgard survived this day, it would forever stand as the greatest barrier to Thanos' plans of universal domination. Then, in an instant, Thor erupted forward, faster than lightning, faster than thought. His battle axe arced through space so swiftly it left only a ghostly afterimage behind. Thanos merely sneered. With a casual flick, he raised the Infinity Gauntlet, the 6 stones igniting in a dazzling swirl of gold, purple, and blue. From the tiny fissures between the gems, raw cosmic power poured forth, weaving itself into a radiant dome. It was as if the very fabric of the universe had coalesced into a shield against the oncoming storm. Thor's axe descended with a bone-shaking whistle. Then, boom! The heavens cracked, the ground trembled, and the stars themselves seemed to dim under the force of the impact. A blinding flash of energy bloomed across the battlefield, casting every shadow into sharp relief. In that moment of pure chaos, Ethan gripped his weapon tighter, steeling himself for whatever would come next. Ethan raised his head just in time to see a blinding light eclipse the sun, revealing the depths of space as though laid out on a black canvas. Stars shimmered, teasing him with their nearness, but there was no beauty in the scene, only impending doom. Suddenly, an invisible force tore at the earth like a gargantuan hand, ripping open the G round in spiderweb patterns. Cracks split the soil, spewing rivers of molten lava in some places, while in others the very land, rocks, and even living creatures were swallowed by gaping abysses. A shock wave of unimaginable power surged outward, flattening mountains and carving away rivers as it rushed across the battlefield. Dust and debris blasted into the sky, blotting out the sun and turning daylight into a dim, orange haze. When the air finally began to clear, Ethan's heart pounded at the sight before him. The once fertile fields were now a grotesque complexion of fissures, deep, jagged scars running like veins across the earth. The world lay in ruins, a stark monument to the destructive force that had just been unleashed. Ethan stood at the rim of the crater, surveying the devastation. The blast had turned fertile soil into charcoal, strewn with shards of stone and metal that once bore witness to a flourishing world, now nothing more than silent relics of tragedy. Cosmic energy had reshaped the landscape, gouging out a massive chunk of the continent as if some celestial leviathan had taken an enormous bite. From above, the rupture resembled a cosmic wound. The land simply vanished, revealing a yawning void that led into the unfathomable depths of space. A low snort escaped Thanos' lips. He raised his armored fist, and the golden Mind Stone on the Infinity Gauntlet glowed brighter than a supernova. A turbulent wave of psychic force surged outward, intent on overwhelming Thor's consciousness and bending his will to the Mad Titan's purpose, just as it had tried moments before. But Thor did not waver. Clad in his formidable destroyer armor, masterfully forged by the dwarves of Nidavellir, imbued with the oldest magics of Asgard, and blessed by the Allfather, the god of thunder, stood resolute. Each plate of the armor thrummed with protective runes, every seam sealed by divine incantations. Even the infinite power of the Mind Stone faltered against such layered defenses, its psychic onslaught crashing harmlessly against an immovable bulwark. Ethan watched from a safe distance, heart pounding as he realized how perilously close the battle had come to ripping apart not only bodies but the very souls of its combatants. He wiped soot from his brow and steeled himself. The fight for their world and everyone in it had only just begun. Thor's mind was an unbreakable fortress, bound by countless ironclad chains. No matter how violently the Mind Stone lashed out, it was like a great wave crashing against an ancient glacier, powerless to penetrate its frozen core. In the end, the attack simply slid away, leaving behind nothing but a whisper of frustration. Thanos' senses were unnervingly acute. In less than the blink of an eye, he registered the Mind Stone's failure. A flicker of surprise swept across his features, quickly replaced by steely resolve. Without a moment's hesitation, he activated the Space Stone. A brilliant sapphire glow flared from its surface, illuminating the void around them with an eerie blue light. Reality itself seemed to shiver and tear, as if some invisible hand were ripping open the fabric of the universe. Out of that rupture, a maw of darkness blossomed, a black hole that hungrily devoured every scrap of light and matter in its vicinity. Its gravity surged like a living beast, threatening to drag everyone, into oblivion. Thor, however, was quicker still. He had already sensed Thanos' intent. The instant the spatial rift yawned open, raw power ignited within him. Muscles coiled, lightning crackled around his hammer, and he braced himself for the onslaught that was coming. Ethan brought his axe down in a vicious arc, the blade ripping through the air like a sea dragon striking its prey. In that instant, his form condensed into a bolt of lightning, tearing through the fractured void around him. His speed, already beyond the reach of any mortal eye, now soared to an almost inhuman extreme. In that flash, Ethan became lightning incarnate. Chapter 47, Fight in Another Place. Every time Thor struck out, it sounded like lightning ripping through the void, trailing dark, sinuous filaments, the very rips he'd torn into space itself. Thanos watched with a growing scowl. At Thor's current speed and power, there was no way to catch him head-on. With a roar that shook the air, Thanos thrust his hands forward. In an instant, the Power Stone flared to life, unleashing a seething storm of purple energy. It spilled from Thanos like a tidal wave of cosmic force he'd been hoarding for ages. A gargantuan shockwave pulsed outward, reshaping mountains, reversing rivers, and churning oceans into frothing chaos. This was more than mere destruction of the physical world. It was a brazen assault on the fabric of time and space itself. Where the wave passed, peaks crumbled, waterways raced upstream, and the earth cracked open in yawning fissures as though the planet itself were reeling. The sky's clouds were swept away, and even the heavens took on a ghostly lavender hue under the Power Stone's wrath. The very fabric of reality warped and trembled beneath the force of Thanos' blow, as if space itself might tear apart at any moment. Even so, Thor moved with incredible speed, mustering a storm of lightning to propel himself out of the path of that devastating fist. He twisted through the air with elegant precision, each turn narrowly evading the peak of Thanos' power while he searched for an opening to strike back. Thanos' expression darkened, his rage coalescing into a ferocious snarl. The Infinity Gauntlet glittered on his hand as he clenched it into a fist. This was not merely a clash of enchanted metal and cosmic gems. It was the raw, primordial energy of the universe given form. The mind, power, and space stones flared to life, their brilliant light burning like the eyes of ancient deities, slicing through the bounds of time and space. With that single, earth-shaking punch, Thanos channeled every ounce of his wrath and resolve. A piercing whistle cut through the void as the gauntlet-punched fist tore toward Thor. Wherever it passed, it seemed an invisible titan's hand rended the air, leaving behind web-like cracks in the very structure of reality. In that moment, the battlefield stood on the brink of annihilation, and only the Thunder God's next move could decide its fate. Cracks ripped through the sky like the jaws of a titanic beast, hungrily swallowing everything in their path. Thor's lightning-wreathed form flickered under their onslaught, each bolt shattering as though delicate glass struck by a hammer. Even the god's mighty body could not withstand the onslaught. It fragmented in an instant, the pieces scattering like mournful fireworks against the night. But as the last shards of illusion drifted away, Thanos realized he'd been deceived. The Thor before him was only a phantasm, expertly woven from thunder and guile. The true god lay hidden within the storm, biding his time for the perfect counterstrike. A chill thrill shot through Thanos' veins, the sure knowledge that his opponent's bravado masked a trap. He allowed himself a contemptuous smile, both in celebration of his own insight and in derision of Thor's trickery. Without hesitation, he raised his gauntlet-clad fist and swept his arm in a devastating arc, unleashing a wave of power meant to rend worlds in two. Boom! The universe itself shook in that moment, as light and raw power collided in a display beyond words. Thanos' vision was overwhelmed by a blinding white flash, a furious clash of thunder and churning energy. The two forces tore at one another, each devouring the other, while rending the very fabric of space around them. Through this cosmic tempest, Thor reappeared, not merely a herald of storm and lightning, but fully united with their might as the true god of thunder. He stood encased in a colossal orb of crackling energy that swelled until it erupted into a blinding column of light, shooting straight into the heavens. Its brilliance surpassed that of distant stars, turning the void into a realm of daylight. Yet this was more than a breathtaking spectacle. The beam carried within it the power to unmake worlds. As it ascended, the layers of space began to fracture one by one, as though kneaded by some unseen hand. Then, in an instant, the universe's structure gave way, distorting and twisting beneath the assault of Thor's divine radiance. Violent, tyrannical thunder ripped the heavens apart like furious dragons, their jagged white bolts piercing both sky and soil. Lightning spears slammed into the Asgard continent, carving gashes that stretched from the planet's surface into the cold void of space, an unmistakable sign that the kingdom of gods now hovered at the epicenter of an otherworldly catastrophe. Everyone who lived on Asgard, deity and mortal alike, felt the tremors of impending doom. They craned their necks skyward, only to find the once tranquil firmament shattered by glowing cracks and seething lightning, as if the universe itself were tearing open. At the center of it all yawned a vast abyss, from which red-hot fissures spread out like the talons of a demonic hand. Mountains split, rivers boiled over, and the earth fractured into yawning chasms. From these wounds, molten rocks surged upward in columns 10,000 meters high, staining the sky a fiery crimson. Every breath was heavy, with the acrid stench of sulfur and the palpable despair that seeped from the gaping maw below. People shrieked and scattered, desperate to flee this cataclysm, but against such primal cosmic force, their efforts were pitiful. Asgard's grand temples, those soaring halls that had stood as monuments to countless victories, now groaned and cracked beneath the relentless thunder. Bolts of raw power split the sky, and every moment threatened to turn those proud spires to dust. Inside his gleaming armor, Ethan drew on the Reality Stone's warped energies to deflect Thanos' assault. The suit shuddered as it bent space itself around incoming blows, yet even that was barely enough. Thor's own might, legendary though it was, paled in comparison to the Infinity Stones. And Thanos, though he could not yet unleash their full, unbridled potential, needed only to claim all 6 stones before their immeasurable power could be fully realized. "Thanos!" Thor roared, eyes burning with anguish as he surveyed the ruin of his home. Lightning crackled over the shattered fields of Valhalla, and the god of thunder felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. He could not hold this fight in Asgard's final hours. Ethan knew that even with the Reality Stone in his grasp, Thanos couldn't restore the countless lives lost on Asgard. No matter how many times he rewrote reality, the fallen would remain gone forever. So when the Mad Titan stood before him, Ethan didn't hesitate. He swung his enchanted axe. Thanos raised his modified Infinity Gauntlet to block the blow. Since their last encounter, the Titan had personally reforged the Gauntlet's armor, making it impervious even to Thor's mightiest strikes. The moment Ethan's axe clashed against the gauntlet, metal rang against metal, yet the blade left not a scratch. Thanos smirked and flexed his gauntleted hand, intent on crushing the axe's haft. But before his grip could close, the ancient destroyer armor, bonded to the Reality Stone, erupted in a blinding cascade of power. Reality itself seemed to warp around Thanos as the stone's energy poured through the armor's runes, ready to obliterate whatever stood in its path. Chapter 1048, Shifting the Battlefield and Ethan's Combat Style. The Reality Stone erupted in a blaze of purest light, its power resonating with the very fabric of the cosmos. That brilliance wasn't merely a dance of color and radiance, it was a distortion of reality itself, a trembling of the laws that governed every star and atom. At the edge of Asgard's domain, where Thor faced off against Thanos, space itself buckled. It was as if an invisible titan had reached across the void to twist the world's geometry. The once majestic halls of Asgard lay in ruins, their defenses collapsing under Thanos' onslaught. Thor would not yield. Gathering his will around the Reality Stone, he rewrote their coordinates, bending and folding the battlefield to break Thanos' advantage and safeguard his people from total annihilation. The stone's glow swelled until the very air seemed to rip open, forming a vast cosmic vortex that would carry both combatants to a new theater of war. Thor and Thanos hurtled through the swirling vortex, drawn irresistibly toward the deepest reaches of the cosmos. Even a being as powerful as Thanos strained to hold himself together against the tearing currents of raw energy, every muscle and sinew screaming under the strain. The farther they flew, the more oppressive the void became. Space itself seemed to twist and writhe, warping their vision and sending alien forces clawing at their minds. In the eye of this maelstrom, Thor reached deep within himself. Drawing on his intimate bond with the Reality Stone, channeled through the shimmering destroyer armor, he wove a lattice of energy that tamed the chaos. Slowly, the disorienting surges yielded to his control, and the two warriors stabilized their flight path. When the tumult finally subsided, they emerged into an unfamiliar starfield. Beneath them lay a dead planet, an expanse of jagged rock and yawning craters, utterly devoid of life or atmosphere. Not even the faintest wind stirred its surface. It was as though the universe had forgotten this desolate orb, sealing it away in eternal silence. Thor guided their descent, and their boots touched the barren ground with a dull thud. Thanos stepped forward, surveying the wasteland with cold disdain. "What do you make of it?" Thor asked, his voice echoing across the hollow plains. Thanos narrowed his eyes, scanning the horizon. "A perfect place to begin," he replied, turning his gauntleted hand toward the endless gray waste. "No one will hear us coming." With the combined power of Ethan and Thor bearing down on him, the planet and its star system hardly seemed stable enough to survive their clash. Thor intended to use the Reality Stone to shift them through space, a move Thanos noted but didn't immediately challenge. After all, as long as Thor remained involved in the transfer, the Reality Stone would inevitably fall into Thanos' hands. He had only one true objective: possession of that gem. The venue of the battle was immaterial. Any sacrifice was justified if it secured the Reality Stone for him. So Thanos calmly raised his right hand, clad in the Infinity Gauntlet. One by one, the embedded gems flared to life before locking onto the vivid blue glow of the Space Stone. With a thought, he wove a stable spatial field around them, drawing on his indomitable will and deep command of the universe's laws. A shimmering corridor of cosmic energy formed at his feet. Thanos was ready to seize control of the battlefield itself. The spatial barrier shimmering around the planet served two purposes. It would withstand the cataclysmic shockwaves Thor and Thanos were about to unleash, and it would protect the world, and even the wider star system, from any lingering fallout. As the blue glow of the Infinity Gauntlet flared ever brighter, the planet's crust began to rearrange itself at a molecular level. What had once been a fragile shell grew as hard as diamond, wrapped in an imperceptible yet impenetrable shield. Thor recognized the advantage this provided and held his strike. If he attacked before Thanos finished stabilizing the field, his efforts would be wasted, and might even throw off his own battle cadence. So the Thunder God drew a deep breath and focused inward, gathering every ounce of strength, centering his will. In his grip, Stormbreaker, his mighty axe, hummed with latent power, as if eager to taste conflict at last. At last, Thanos activated the final calibrations of his cosmic stabilizer. Instantly, the warped fabric of space across the planet's surface seemed to be rewoven, settling into a new, unshakable equilibrium. Every particle of dust and every shaft of light was held in perfect, preordained alignment, an eerie blend of beauty and menace. Just as that stillness threatened to endure forever, Thor sprang into action. With a thunderous roar, he lunged forward, Stormbreaker, his battle axe, crackling with divine power. On this airless, lifeless world, no atmosphere stood to slow him down. The axe blazed through the void like a glowing meteor, etching a brilliant arc against the inky sky. But the newly stabilized space itself proved to be Thor's greatest adversary. The cosmic field, serving as the universe's skeletal framework, resisted that blow with uncompromising rigidity. When godly might met immovable order, the impact rippled outward like a stone cast into a silent lake, sending shockwaves coursing through the very bones of reality. The instant Ethan's battle axe bit into the void, reality itself seemed to shatter. A blinding rift cracked open across the planet's surface, unleashing a pulse of energy so fierce it set every mountain trembling and sent shockwaves rippling through the cosmos. Stars in distant galaxies quivered under the assault, as if the universe itself flinched at the force of that single strike. Within the fissure, fragments of space and time twisted together in a dazzling display of light and motion, a turbulent tapestry of raw power. Even the hardest rock on the planet quaked before this onslaught, each seismic tremor a reminder that Ethan's blow had reached beyond the physical realm, striking at the very structure of the universe. In that moment, the world and all of creation felt the full weight of his attack. In the remotest reaches of the cosmos, that sudden fluctuation unleashed an invisible storm, one so potent it transcended the laws of matter, warped the very fabric of space-time, and set distant stars trembling, as though the universe itself were bearing witness to the magnitude of the blow. Thanos' fist tightened, channels of raw energy from the space stone pouring through him like a roaring flood. In that moment, his thoughts drifted back to the past, to the memory of Ethan's effortless manipulation. The sting of that powerlessness, and the cold frustration that followed, still lingered, a bitter reminder of how far he had yet to come. Chapter 1049, Bullying. In that instant, Thanos' eyes gleamed with a new resolve. He would wield this power against Thor, make him taste the very force he'd unleashed. In the vast expanse of the cosmos, raw strength and deep understanding are two sides of the same coin. Unchecked power can topple stars, but without the steady hand of knowledge, it flails like a headless fly. So Thanos set out on a path of self-reinvention. He no longer sought sheer might alone. He craved the wisdom to wield it perfectly. To achieve the ultimate fusion of power and intellect, he turned to Ethan, once known as Luthor, whose lessons had already reshaped Thanos' destiny. What followed was a relentless odyssey of trial and error. Under Ethan's exacting tutelage, Thanos surrendered every old assumption. Night after night, he pored over quantum equations, dissected string theory models, and unraveled the mathematical fabric of multidimensional spacetime. Each breakthrough demanded the sacrifice of an entrenched belief. Each failure drove him deeper into the abyss of cosmic knowledge. Months stretched into years. Pain and doubt shadowed every step. Yet piece by piece, Thanos rebuilt his very mind, remapping neural pathways to perceive the fourth dimension, and even dimensions beyond. His thoughts no longer followed familiar contours. They rippled outward, tracing the contours of realities invisible to ordinary senses. The transformation was nothing short of alchemical. Where once raw fury had driven him, now a crystalline clarity guided his actions. Power and wisdom, once at odds, now thrummed in harmony within him. Thanos could instantly calculate the curvature of spacetime, anticipate Thor's thunderous attacks, and bend reality with a precision born of both strength and insight. Armed with this new mastery, Thanos prepared to confront his old rival. He would show Thor that the greatest bully is not the one who wields power blindly, but the one who knows exactly where and how to strike. And when the Mad Titan unleashed his perfected might, the cosmos itself would shudder at the balance of force and reason he had forged. Ethan felt the torrent of newfound knowledge settle into his mind, transforming itself into a sharper lens through which he now viewed reality. This profound shift awakened within him an unprecedented power, the ability to perceive and navigate higher dimensions, realms previously confined to mathematical theories and the wildest conjectures of theoretical physicists. At first, Ethan sensed these dimensions as faint echoes at the edge of his awareness. Then, almost without warning, he slipped into them, gliding through a vast, fluid space where the usual boundaries of time and distance melted away. In this domain, past, present, and future coexisted like ripples on an infinite pond. Walls, floors, and ceilings lost all meaning. He discovered that he could twist and fold these dimensions around him, forging invisible bridges from one point in the cosmos to another. With each experiment, Ethan's mastery grew. He conjured shimmering pathways of pure geometry, tunnels woven from the very fabric of hyperspace, allowing him to traverse light years in the heartbeat of an instant. No longer bound by the linear corridors of three-dimensional travel, he simply stepped through the threshold, arriving at distant worlds before his body had time to register motion. As his power matured, Ethan himself began to change. A faint, otherworldly glow radiated from his skin, as though he'd become a prism for the universe's deeper harmonics. Each breath he drew seemed to hum with the vibrations of countless realities overlapping. In that moment, Ethan didn't just teleport or vanish, he dissolved into the multiverse itself, his form simultaneously present in infinite parallel spaces, poised to explore whatever wonders or dangers lay beyond. With every step, subtle distortions rippled through the very fabric of space and time, like an artist gently brushing fresh strokes onto a canvas. Thor felt a surge of helplessness and confusion. He raised the god, King's battle axe, and swung with all his might at the shadowy figures before him. But the axe bit only empty air. It was as if Thanos had transcended the material world altogether, becoming utterly untouchable. Thanos' mastery of the Infinity Stones let him slip through higher-dimensional realms at will, while Thor remained trapped in familiar three-dimensional space, vulnerable to attacks he could neither see nor predict. The imbalance left Thor in a dire predicament. His power was still formidable, yet on this warped battlefield he groped helplessly through an endless fog, every attempt to strike out thwarted by an invisible barrier. Bound by the limits of his own three-dimensional existence, he felt like a blind man touching an elephant, relying on intuition and past experience, both woefully inadequate here. "Thor," Thanos' voice rang out, cold and mocking. "Brace yourself. My next assault will come from a dimension you can't even perceive. Your strength and courage may be unmatched in the three-dimensional realm," Thanos intoned, his form flickering in midair. "But across this vast universe, they amount to nothing more than a drop in the ocean. You cannot perceive dimensions beyond your own, and that is your fatal flaw." With each word, space and time rippled around him, warping as if reality itself shifted to accommodate his presence. "Ethan, you may be an Asgardian and wield great power, but your mind is confined to three spatial dimensions. You cannot even fathom those above." Then Thanos struck. He stepped through a high-dimensional shortcut, an almost instantaneous leap that left a jagged tear in the very fabric of existence where Ethan had been standing. Again and again he reappeared, each arrival heralded by violent distortions in space and time. Even more terrifying was his command of energies from beyond three dimensions, compressed and unleashed in ways no mortal or god could hope to predict. Caught off guard, Ethan braced himself as the universe twisted around him, realizing too late that this was a battle fought on a plane he had no hope of understanding. In the high-dimensional realm, these energies wove together like invisible silk threads, forming a vast, intricate net, each strand carrying enough force to obliterate an entire planet. Once projected back into our three-dimensional world, they broke free of physical laws and shattered into countless destructive beams. They rained down from the sky like divine retribution, intertwining and colliding in midair. The resulting flashes of light dyed the heavens a furious red, transforming the battlefield into a blazing sea of fire. Every streak of that inferno was the product of Thanos' meticulous control over high-dimensional power. Not only did the beams burn with unimaginable heat, they also sparked chain reactions upon touching any material, reducing everything to nothingness. Caught in the center of this cataclysm, Thor fought on with all his might. Even his God-King battle axe, renowned for its razor edge, produced nothing more than faint, futile sparks against those overwhelming blasts, as if the universe itself mocked his resistance. Ethan watched the carnage unfold, a strange, inscrutable look on his face as Thanos roared in triumph, his laughter echoing across the scorched sky. Ethan's voice rang out, disbelief and fury lacing every word. "Those were my words. He stole them from me." He hadn't expected Thanos to revert to his old ruthless methods, especially not against Thor, whose recklessness always made him Thanos' favorite plaything. There stood the Thunder God, battered and on the brink of collapse. Just when all hope seemed lost, the destroyer armor, Ethan's last resort, came alive. As the armor activated the Reality Stone, a raw, ungovernable force pulsed outward, seizing control of the surrounding space and time. Even Thanos' vaunted mastery of higher-dimensional realms crumbled before it. Wherever the Reality Stone's crimson light spread, reality itself warped. The fundamental laws of the universe bent and rewrote themselves as in deference to the stone's will. Thanos' own space-warping assaults faltered and died. Every teleportation flickered out. Every cosmic blast was twisted, sapped of power, and rendered null. What should have been unstoppable simply unraveled before that reality-bending force. The Mad Titan froze, shock etched across his face. The Reality Stone, he breathed, scarcely believing the impotence of his beloved Space Stone in its presence. But even in that stunned moment, Thanos' resolve steeled. A seasoned warrior never stays down for long. Ethan shifted tactics in an instant, channeling the raw energy of the Power Stone into the Space Stone in a desperate bid to bolster its strength against the Reality Stone. As one of the 6 Infinity Gems scattered across the cosmos, the Power Stone grants its wielder dominion over the fundamental laws of physics. When fused with the Space Stone, the 2 gems unleash energy surges so potent they threaten to unravel the very fabric of the universe. Under Thanos' crushing will, the Space Stone flared with blinding radiance, warping the surroundings into a cascade of twisting, spiraling space-time vortices. Ethan watched in awe as the vortices, like swirling maelstroms suspended in the universe's depths, clashed and wove themselves into the brilliant, unpredictable glow of the Reality Stone. The result was nothing short of an unprecedented cosmic storm. At its heart, the Reality Stone's power bent and warped nearly every law of existence, striving to remold the cosmos according to its own inscrutable will. Yet for all its dazzle, a lone Reality Stone proved helpless against the combined might of the fully charged Power Stone and the Space Stone. The Power Stone, a singular repository of the universe's purest energy, when fused with the Space Stone, unleashed a force as boundless as the stars themselves, capable in an instant of tearing through space-time and rewriting its very structure. Under the overwhelming surge of these 2 Infinity Gems, the Reality Stone's incandescent distortions began to fade. Where space-time had once bent and buckled, it now relaxed and realigned, as though the storm had never been. Even the quantum tunneling effects Thanos had accounted for in his calculations were overwhelmed by this raw, limitless power, restoring order to a universe teetering on the brink. In classical physics, an object needs enough energy to overcome a barrier's potential before it can pass through. Quantum mechanics, however, opens another door. Even if a particle's energy is lower than the barrier's height, there remains a finite probability that it will tunnel through, as if space itself briefly softens. Thanos weaponized this quantum tunneling effect to devastating result. He quantized his attack energy so that it slipped through the seemingly indestructible destroyer armor like a ghost and struck Thor's body directly. This technique not only nullified the armor's defenses, but also caught Thor completely off guard, leaving him powerless to resist. When it comes to harnessing the Infinity Stones, Thanos' mastery is nothing short of brilliant. Through the Well of Eternity, he gained profound insight into each stone's unique power and learned how to push them to their absolute limits. In Thanos' case, this vast knowledge has become both his greatest weapon and his deepest curse. He is driven by an insatiable thirst for knowledge and an unyielding hunger for power, and he will stop at nothing to satisfy them. In his relentless pursuit, he has become a genius on par with, if not surpassing, Tony Stark. Under his direction, the Infinity Stones have ceased to be mere sources of raw energy. They've become precision instruments in his quest for cosmic domination. Thanos has mastered each stone's individual capabilities, and, through painstaking calculations and daring experiments, he's unlocked the secret synergies between them. These newly discovered linkages allow him to weave spells of cosmic scale, elevating his power to near omnipotence. In the original story, Thor wields the Stormbreaker to channel all 6 stones into a single devastating blow. But in this retelling, even with a mightier God King axe and an upgraded destroyer armor, Thor cannot evade Thanos' carefully laid trap. With the Space Stone, Thanos drags him into a pocket dimension of his own design, a higher dimensional battlefield where Thor's strength is sapped. There, like a god enthroned above all creation, Thanos toys with the Asgardians' diminished power, demonstrating once and for all why he is the universe's most formidable force. Ethan watched in awe as the very fabric of reality bent beneath Thanos' will. This was the power of knowledge, not mere raw strength, and it sprang from Thanos' deep grasp of string theory. In that bold framework, The universe's true building blocks aren't particles at all, but one-dimensional strings. Depending on how they vibrate, these strings give rise to everything we observe: gravity, electromagnetism, the weak force, and the strong force. Calling on the Space Stone, Thanos made those imperceptible strings visible and then tuned their frequencies with surgical precision. From them, he wove an energy being perfectly attuned to higher dimensional space. Infused with Thanos' own consciousness and charged by the Power Stone's infinite energy, this entity could rival any force in existence. In the dimension Thanos created, he was more than a visitor. He was its architect and supreme ruler. There, he could rewrite physical law and reshape the environment itself at a thought, elevating him to the status of true god of that realm. In this realm, time can run backward, space can fold in on itself, and matter can appear or vanish at will. Every fleeting thought of Thanos is instantaneously woven into reality. His will alone holds sway over the very laws of existence here. He has harnessed the peculiar power of quantum entanglement, the phenomenon in which two or more particles mirror each other's states instantly, regardless of the distance separating them, and used it to bind his consciousness to every particle in this dimension. The result is a vast, living quantum network through which he perceives every fluctuation as it happens and replies with instantaneous precision, ensuring that no force can ever threaten his supremacy. At the same time, Thanos has cleverly put the second law of thermodynamics, the inexorable tendency of entropy to increase in a closed system, to his own use. By continually injecting fresh energy and information into the realm, he keeps its overall disorder at a perpetually high level. This imposed chaos, paradoxically, stabilizes the dimension, preventing any unintended collapse of its bizarre, reality-bending architecture. In Thanos' hands, both quantum mechanics and thermodynamic law have become tools of absolute dominion. Using the Space Stone's power, Thanos drew in streams of energy and information from countless other dimensions, pouring them into this high-dimensional realm. As these foreign forces intertwined and collided, they gave rise to strange, intricate phenomena. Spatial complexity soared, particle interactions grew ever more frequent and convoluted, and the system's entropy spiraled upward. With his profound grasp of the universe's fundamental laws, Thanos had become all but invincible here. Within this twisted domain, Thor felt a despair unlike any he'd ever known. Every tactic he tried dissolved without a trace, as though swallowed by an infinite void. Thanos watched from the sidelines with cold detachment, his eyes alight with unwavering confidence in his knowledge and power. Thor's strength and indomitable will were legendary, but against Thanos' mastery of cosmic law, they amounted to little. And yet, at the darkest moment of that fierce confrontation, Thor was poised to strike the blow that would change everything. Ethan stood clad in the Uru metal destroyer armor, yet even its fabled power faltered under the weight of Thanos' unmatched strength. Every strike in their duel sent spiderweb cracks racing across Thor's Uru-forged armor until it lay in ruins, scarcely more than brittle scrap. Thanos allowed himself a cold, contemptuous sneer as he loomed over the Prince of Asgard, who lay battered on the scorched earth. The Power Stone within Thanos' gauntlet pulsed with a sickly, ominous glow. Slowly, deliberately, Thanos extended a finger and brushed it against Thor's shattered plate. For a heartbeat, the world seemed to freeze. That armor, wrought by Asgard's finest smiths from the fabled Uru metal, had repelled every known assault, physical or magical. Yet before Thanos' inconceivable might, even Uru proved as fragile as parchment. The Titan compressed 10,000 tons per cubic centimeter into the point of his fingertip, an unfathomable force, equivalent to concentrating the mass of a mountain onto a single point. Under that pressure, no substance could resist. One by one, the metal's atomic bonds ruptured, unleashing a sharp, agonized tearing sound that rang across the battlefield. As the destroyer's armor finally split open, the reality gem lay exposed at its core. Its light flashed through the fractured metal like a newborn star cresting the void, an irresistible lure to any who beheld it. Thanos reached in, prying the gem free, and it gleamed in his palm as if to celebrate reunion with its true master. Thor dropped to one knee, his breath ragged as he watched the gem's ethereal glow. In that moment, all hope drained away. He knew he had been utterly defeated. This strange, high-dimensional realm, shaped by Thanos himself, had become an inescapable prison. With deliberate calm, Thanos pressed the reality gem into the Infinity Gauntlet. Instantly, the fabric of the chamber tore apart under an unseen force. Crimson energy gushed out in molten currents, the Reality Stone's first raw surge of power, desperate to break its bonds and run rampant. Yet Thanos, ever in control, channeled the torrent with a mere thought, quelling its wild violence and cementing his dominion over this new, devastating might. Ethan steadied his breath and called upon the Power Stone's might. Veins of pure, crackling energy spread through the Infinity Gauntlet's metal, coiling around the volatile Reality Stone. With surgical precision, he used that raw power to channel and temper the Reality Stone's chaotic energies, converting its erratic surges into a smooth, controlled flow. Any risk of an energy backlash or sudden explosion was snuffed out before it could flare. At the same moment, he tapped into the Space Stone. In an instant, the air around him rippled and folded, weaving a lattice of spatial distortions that sealed him in a fortress of warped reality. This barrier, born of time and space itself, was invisible to the naked eye and unbreakable by any outside force. Not even the combined might of the remaining stones could hope to pierce it. Under these twin defenses, the Reality Stone's power was locked away, unable to leak or lash out. The Infinity Gauntlet, already a masterpiece of cosmic engineering, had been transformed once more. Now it could not only absorb and store each stone's energy safely, but also neutralize any dangerous interactions between them. In Ethan's hands, the gauntlet had become the ultimate inhibitor, a perfect safeguard against its own boundless potential. Under the triple safeguards, the Reality Stone's power lay completely sealed within the Infinity Gauntlet, incapable of leaking out. Across its surface shimmered a nearly invisible, immaterial energy field, Thanos' own failsafe to prevent anyone from snatching the stones with bare hands. Undetectable to all but the most sensitive readings, this field would only grow stronger and more impervious as additional gems were slotted into the gauntlet. "Submit to me, Thor." Thanos' voice thundered in Thor's mind. With a casual snap of his fingers, the gauntlet whirred to life, its hidden mechanisms unfolding. In the chamber that held the Power Stone, secret panels slid open to form an ethereal circuit linking T to the Mind Stone. Then the violet, destructive tide of cosmic energy poured through the Uru metal conduits, perfectly attuned to both energy and enchantment, and flooded into the Mind Stone, charging it with raw power. Ethan stood before the towering figure of Thor, his Uru metal harness humming with latent power. In the myths of the Nine Realms, Uru is hailed as the magic metal, a rare alloy capable of channeling and storing vast energies while adapting seamlessly to arcane currents. Now, as the violet radiance of the power gem washed over the metal's circuitry, it sprang to life, casting its own subtle purple glow that intertwined with the Mind Gem's golden brilliance. As the two energies fused, the Mind Gem's soft amber light flared into a searing gold. Its energy circuit, empowered by the Uru's unique properties, had reached full activation. What had been mere amplification now became a quantum leap in psychic force. Control over thoughts, emotions, and the very will of its target was sharper, deeper, more ruthless. Thor, recipient of that psychic onslaught, staggered. His hammer dropped with a dull clang, as 1,000 invisible blades seemed to slice through his consciousness. Pain, raw and unrelenting, convulsed his limbs. He crumpled to the stone floor, eyes clenched shut, and a high-pitched wail ripped from his throat. Ethan watched, chest heaving, as the god of thunder writhed. The newly awakened synergy between Uru Metal and the Infinity Gems had delivered exactly the kind of mental strike he'd needed, swift, decisive, absolute. Now all that remained was to press that advantage before Thor could regain his bearings. The power of the Mind Stone didn't merely assault Thor's nervous system. It reached deeper, attempting to erode his very will and bend him entirely to Thanos' command. Under its influence, his consciousness was yanked into a churning vortex of memories and visions, triumphant battles of the past, the faces of friends and loved ones lost to war, and fleeting glimpses of possible futures. Yet beside Thanos' uncompromising will, even these recollections felt brittle, as if they might shatter with a single thought. A fierce revolt raged in Thor's heart. He refused to bow, refused to let another shape his destiny. But against Thanos' cosmic might, his resistance was little more than a ripple in an endless sea. Gradually, the fire in his eyes dimmed. His irises darkened to a molten gold so dense that his pupils seemed to vanish, subsumed by the stone's power. It was the unmistakable sign that the Mind Stone had seized complete control, an apex form of mental domination that now held Thor's body and mind in its unyielding grip. The Mind Stone generates its own energy field to disrupt Thor's neural activity, seizing control of his thoughts, emotions, and behavior. This influence doesn't stop at his nervous system. It penetrates into his subconscious. Though Thor retains self-awareness and the semblance of independent thought, he can only act according to the Mind Stone's will. Chapter 1052, The Tyrant Thor Who Conquered the Nine Realms, is about to strike. Thor has become nothing more than a puppet in Thanos' hands, utterly enslaved by the power of the Mind Stone. The fierce spark that once burned in his eyes is gone, replaced by an empty void and chilling indifference. Through painstaking modifications, Thanos has only strengthened the stone's influence, making it utterly impervious to the blunt methods that used to work. No crushing blow to the skull, no shockwave of force can free him now. The Mind Stone's control has burrowed deep into Thor's psyche, compelling absolute obedience. Thanos, confident that no ordinary healer or mystic could sever this bond, and that only a being of power matching the Mind Stone itself could hope to. The Mad Titan returns to Asgard, with his enforcer in tow. Unaware of the horror about to engulf them, the Asgardians scarcely register Thor's arrival before a psychic storm erupts across the Nine Realms. In an instant, faces freeze, eyes grow vacant, and wills shatter. Every mind is seized and bent to Thanos' command. Once proud and free, the people of Asgard have become hollow shells, puppets dancing to a cruel master's tune. And at the center of this grisly tableau stands Thor, the conqueror of worlds, now reimagined as the ultimate weapon of tyranny. The reckoning has begun. I need an army, and Asgard is where I'll find it. Thanos' voice echoed through the chamber, cold and commanding. If he stood any hope of challenging the Galactic Empire, he would require power beyond anything he had previously mustered. His current legions were formidable, but they could not compare to the warriors of Asgard. He turned to the fallen god before him. Thor, you will conquer the Nine Realms. Forge an army under my banner. Once they are ready, they will fight for me. Thanos reached out, placing a crushing hand on Thor's head. His fingers raked through those pale locks, an unspoken display of dominance. Thor's dark golden eyes, once blazing with defiance, dulled to lifeless pools. He bowed his head. My master, he intoned, his voice stripped of warmth and pride. It sounded mechanical, a hollow echo of the god he once was. Freed from his own hesitation by Thanos' mind shackles, Thor's thoughts turned immediately to strategy. He summoned the memory of every race he had encountered throughout the cosmos, but one name emerged above all others, the Saiyans. Legendary for their prodigious strength and ruthless ambition, the Saiyans not only mastered combat, they conquered worlds, enslaved populations, and sold entire planets to the highest bidder. A true warrior race, they would form the backbone of Thanos' new army. Master, Thor said, lifting his head just enough to meet Thanos' gaze, if you seek an unstoppable force, we should strike at the Saiyans first. Their power and zeal for conquest make them the perfect foundation for our ranks. Thanos studied the expressionless face of his servant, then allowed a faint curl of satisfaction to touch his lips. The first step in his grand design had been set. With the Nine Realms under his control and the Saiyans at his command, nothing in the universe would stand in his way. Chapter 7. The Discovery of the Saiyans. Ethan stood motionless in the vast chamber of the sanctuary, his gaze never wavering from the Mad Titan before him. Remember, he said quietly, anyone under the Mind Stone's influence will serve its wielder without question. Their independent thought bends toward you, Thanos. But there's one more detail you should know. The Saiyans. Thanos' brow furrowed. He had traversed 1,000 worlds, witnessed untold horrors, and laid waste to countless armies, yet he had never heard of this so-called Saiyan race. Cruelty and planetary raids for slave trade were nothing new in the universe's darker corners, but Ethan's calm certainty convinced him there was truth here. With a measured breath, Thanos lifted the Mind Stone. Its golden glow pulsed outward like a probing spotlight, slicing through layered defenses to see eyes Thor's memories. In a flicker of images, Raditz appeared, warrior's armor gleaming, scouter affixed to his brow, followed by the prideful Prince Vegeta and the towering figure of Nappa. Thanos watched each vision unfold, the athletes of energy blasts, the sheer force they unleashed, even the thunderous might of Odin's son paled beside their power. Without the Infinity Stones at his command, he could not guarantee victory against a single full-blooded Saiyan. Thanos relaxed his grip, the Mind Stone's radiance dimming. He studied Ethan's steady expression. There was opportunity here, a race of unparalleled strength, bound by a warrior's code, scattered across the cosmos. Whether as allies, enemies, or pawns, the Saiyans represented a force Thanos could neither ignore nor easily overcome. Quietly, the Titan allowed himself a small, approving smile. "Very well," he said. "Prepare the records. I intend to learn everything about these Saiyans, and to decide how best to harness their power for my purpose." As Ethan retrieved his datapad, Thanos turned his thoughts inward, already charting a course that would bring the Saiyans into the greatest crusade the universe had ever seen. The Saiyans' legendary combat prowess would unquestionably strengthen Thanos' army, but they were notoriously difficult to control. Thanos, however, felt no misgivings. He possessed countless means to bend even the most powerful warriors to his will. "Excellent. The Saiyans are indeed the perfect choice," he murmured, satisfaction curling his voice. "But first, the 9 realms must fall. Once they're ours, we'll hunt down their homeworld." No one knew the Saiyan planet's location. Even if Thanos had a lead, he couldn't afford to divert attention from his current campaign. Conquering the 9 realms and amassing military might was his immediate priority. At his command, Thor moved swiftly. Though his body remained bound by Thanos' power, his mind was clearer than ever, focused solely on completing the mission. As Thanos' most trusted pawn, he marshaled every remaining Asgardian resource for the coming invasion. In Asgard, no one dared object. Under Thanos' dominion, resistance was unthinkable. After all, Thor's crusade to subjugate the 9 realms was eerily reminiscent of Odin's conquests of old, only now, with far more fearsome forces at his back. "Master, my sister is here too," Thor said, voice tight with concern. "She's formidable, but she won't surrender." Thor's thoughts flicked to Hela, the fearsome goddess of death. "Take me to her," he commanded. Thanos' lips curved into a tantalizing smile. In his eyes, any of Odin's offspring who could serve his conquests were nothing more than pieces on a board to be played. He motioned Thor forward, and together they stepped onto the Rainbow Bridge. They traveled through the cosmos until they arrived at a remote, barren star field. Here, drawing on the Reality Stone embedded in the destroyer's armor, Thanos had forged an impenetrable cage. It was no realm of Hell's icy underworld, nor did it boast the glittering splendor of Asgard, only unending darkness and a suffocating stillness, as if even time itself had been frozen. Thor approached and began to unlock the runic seal. Immediately the air quivered, an ancient, powerful presence pulsed through the void. Then, without warning, a shaft of light pierced the gloom like a beacon from the heavens, illuminating the space before them. At the far end of the shimmering beam, a tall, slender figure stepped forward. Her gait was unhurried, every movement measured and elegant. It was Hela, the goddess of death. Her attire was deceptively simple, yet undeniably regal. Sleek black leather armor etched with glowing green runes, hugging every curve of her lithe form. A waterfall of raven hair cascaded down one side of her face, revealing a single piercing eye that flickered with frigid light. Even the air around her seemed to freeze. "Thor," she called, her voice as crisp and cutting as a blade's edge, laced with contempt. "Have you lost your nerve? Come to beg for my mercy." With a graceful motion, she raised her hands. 2 swords, black as the void between the stars, materialized in an instant, their blades humming with cold power, tips trembling in anticipation. Thor stood firm. "No, sister, I've brought our master Ethan to make you surrender." Hela's lips curved into a mocking smile of disbelief, as though she just heard the universe's most preposterous joke. "Ethan, your master?" She laughed, a sound that seemed to echo in the stillness. "You've certainly outdone yourself this time, brother." She studied Thor intently and at last saw what was wrong. His eyes, once blazing with unbreakable resolve, now gleamed with an unnatural light, the surest sign of a will held captive. "My poor brother, Hela said softly, amusement and pity warring in her tone. I never imagined someone could bend you to their bidding. A low, uneasy laugh escaped her lips. Thor's power was legendary, enough to lock her away under Odin's command, and the thought that such strength now answered another's call sent a chill through her immortal heart. Chapter 1053, Sister and Brother Thugs. I never expected my brother to be under someone else's control. Who is pulling your strings? I demanded. Hela turned her gaze to Thanos. He offered a slow, measured smile as he stepped forward, his eyes locked on her as though weighing her worth. I am Thanos, conqueror of the universe. Your brother Thor has chosen to surrender to me. I invite you to do the same. Stand with us, and together we will rule the cosmos. Hela laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. She raised her ornate sword in a single fluid motion, the blade tracing a lethal arc through the air. Rule the cosmos? How tediously predictable. I answer to no one. I bow to no one. Thanos inclined his head slightly, unperturbed by her scorn. Every being has the right to choose their own destiny. That is the universe's most basic law. His voice remained calm, almost gentle, but edged with an unmistakable warning. Yet know this, Hela, rejecting me condemns you to endless conflict and misery, and I will not hesitate to use force. In this universe, power is everything. A spark of defiance lit in Hela's eyes. She planted her feet, sword at the ready. Then come, Thanos, show me your power. Let's see if you, the so-called conqueror of the universe, are truly worthy of forcing me to yield. Before Hela had even finished speaking, she swept her hand downward, and a torrent of dark energy poured from her fingertips. Countless obsidian weapons erupted into the sky like a thunderous storm, blanketing the heavens and earth as they surged toward Thanos. These blades, each born of Hela's own power, cut black trails through the air, grim harbingers of death, intent on harvesting every spark of life and hope. From afar, the sight was breathtaking. An impenetrable tide of darkness rolling across the battlefield like a vengeful ocean, its depths fathomless and oppressive. The weapons gleamed with a frigid light, promising instant oblivion to anything they touched. Yet these were more than mere instruments of destruction. They were Hela's confidants, forged during her long years of confinement. Throughout her imprisonment, she had envisioned this very moment, her clash with Odin's mightiest adversary, and ceaselessly produced these lethal arms to overwhelm him at last. Now, with her arsenal unleashed, Hela stood poised to prove that neither title nor reputation could save Thanos from her wrath. Chapter X, The Gathering Storm. Hela understood all too well that toppling Odin was as impossible as scaling the heavens, yet each long year of captivity only fueled her hatred and steeled her resolve. In the depths of solitude and despair, her will remained unbroken. She never surrendered her longing for freedom. Refusing to bow before Odin, Hela devoted herself day and night to forging weapons, dreaming of the day when war would rain down across the realms. She had once placed her hopes in Thor, her younger brother. His prodigious strength had so easily subdued and sealed her away. But Thor was not the threat she now faced. Standing before her was someone far deadlier, Thanos, the mad titan. Thanos was no feeble god. Clad in armor and wielding 4 infinity gems, the most potent forces in the universe, his power eclipsed even that of Odin himself. The sheer magnitude of his strength pressed upon Hela like a gathering storm, a weight of fear and urgency she had never known. Interesting, Thanos murmured, amusement flickering in his dark eyes as he surveyed the black, war-forged blades that littered the field. With deliberate slowness, he lifted his right hand. The power gem on his golden gauntlet flared to life, spilling raw, purple energy into the air. In an instant, that cosmic torrent coalesced and surged outward, engulfing everything in its path. Boom! The ground trembled beneath Hela's feet as the unleashed force roared across the battlefield, heralding a war unlike any she had ever prepared for. Ethan hovered at the heart of the tempest, a swirling cloud of black blades, billions of them, whirling around him. They struck the destructive pew, arpeal energy choking the sky with thunderous crashes, as though 2 titanic beasts were locked in mortal combat. Each collision sent shockwaves rippling outward, leveling mountains and tearing up the earth beneath. He hurled blade after blade, pouring every ounce of his strength into breaking the violet barrier and glimpsing the sun beyond. But the power gap was vast. and each of his attacks proved no more than a drop in an endless ocean, dissipating the instant it struck. Behind him, the shattered remnants of his weapons formed a dark storm that swept across the continent, toppling peaks and hurling rubble in every direction. Relentless waves of purple energy battered Ethan like furious tides. Chunks of rock rained down from the heavens, as though the sky itself were punishing him, forcing him to dodge and weave. Still, a few jagged fragments found their mark, tearing into his flesh and staining his battle-worn robes with blood. Yet even as his wounds throbbed and fatigue threatened to overwhelm him, Ethan planted his feet firmly, eyes blazing with defiance. He would not relent. He would tear apart the violet heavens and reclaim the sunlight for the world below. Hala staggered backward, every breath a ragged gasp against the onslaught of pain. Her limbs trembled, and she fought to keep herself upright as Thanos closed the distance between them. Anger and defiance still burned in her eyes, but beneath it lay a deeper current of despair, an unsettling uncertainty about what her future now held. Thanos paused a few paces away, regarding her with cool appraisal. "You fought well, Hala," he admitted, nodding once. A faint spark of respect glinted in his eyes. "But your power isn't enough to defeat me. Yet I admire your courage and resolve. Surrender to me now, and I will grant you a new purpose, as my right hand in our march to conquer the universe." Hala's jaw clenched. She drew herself to her full height, shaking, but unbowed. "Never, Thanos," she said, voice hoarse but steady. "I would rather die than sacrifice my dignity and freedom." Surprise flickered across even among the countless worlds he had subjugated. It was rare to find someone who would choose death over submission. He exhaled slowly, a note of regret seeping into his deep voice. "Very well." He raised his hand, palm outward, and the air around them seemed to freeze. Dark energy coalescing into a palpable pressure that pressed against Hala like the weight of a collapsing star. She steadied herself, green armor shearing fragments of the earth beneath her boots, resolve flaring anew in the face of oblivion. Thanos' offer was gone, only the inevitability of his power remained. And in that moment, Hala prepared herself for whatever fate lay ahead. Thanos didn't strike immediately. Instead, he held the Mind Stone aloft and used it as a conduit to draw in the limitless energy of the Power Stone. A swelling tide of power roared through him, pooling in the Mind Stone until it blazed like a star, ready to pierce any barrier and strike at the deepest fears and desires locked within every mind. "Submit to me," he intoned. This was no mere command. The Mind Stone's glow carried an irresistible compulsion that lashed out at Hela's mental defenses. In an instant, she felt an overwhelming force probing the fortress of her will, seeking to strip away her independence and bend her to Thanos' bidding. But Hala was the goddess of death, far from an ordinary mortal. Master of the secrets of mortality, she summoned every ounce of her remaining strength to resist the invasion. For a heartbeat, it seemed possible that her fierce soul would hold firm against the mad Titan's assault. Yet Thanos' power, amplified by the Mind Stone, proved too great. Slowly, inexorably, Hela's resistance ebbed away. With a final, resigned sigh, her eyes went blank, and her fierce spirit collapsed under his onslaught. The goddess of death was no more than a puppet in Thanos' unyielding grip. Chapter 1054. Your days of opening portals at will are over. Thanos allowed himself a satisfied smile. With a subtle gesture, he channeled the Reality Stone's power, and the jagged scars that crisscrossed Hela's flesh dissolved before their eyes, as though they had never been there. Such feats of reality alteration normally demand a terrible toll on the wielder's life force, yet Thanos possessed the Power Stone, the universe's primordial font of energy, enabling him to rewrite existence on any scale without suffering a drain. Now that Hela had bent the knee, his might had grown ever greater. "You two will mobilize our forces at once," he commanded Hela and Thor, his voice as cold as cosmic steel. "Expand our legions and conquer new worlds in my name." Both deities bowed deeply, their obedience absolute. Having spoken his will, Thanos summoned the Space Stone. In an instant, he vanished, leaving only a rippling tear in the fabric of space to mark where he had stood. When the void closed, Hela and Thor exchanged a brief, resolute glance. Without a word spoken, they turned and set about mustering the armies of the Nine Realms, preparing to fulfill Thanos' dark ambition. Thor leveraged his legendary renown across the Nine Realms to amass a mighty force. He dispatched envoys to distant worlds proclaiming Thanos' grand vision, universal peace and order under the Mad Titan's protection. Yet many civilizations balked at the prospect of serving Thanos. On those who resisted, Hela unveiled her darkest powers. Bound by Thanos' will, every Asgardian warrior obeyed her commands. But Hela went further. She ignited the eternal fire to resurrect her army of the dead and called Fenrir from the abyss. Leading this ghostly horde in person, she became a living tempest of destruction. No stronghold was safe, no soldier or civilian spared. In her wake lay only smoldering ruins and shattered hopes. Worlds that once stood proud were reduced to ashes almost overnight. Fear and despair rippled through the cosmos as word spread of Hela's merciless onslaught. Meanwhile, Thor and Hela's combined efforts swelled the ranks of the Nine Realms legions. Bolstered by formidable warriors, advanced weaponry, and unyielding discipline, this fearsome army became Thanos' primary instrument for subjugating the universe. As the Asgardians' empire grew, however, discontent began to stir across the Nine Realms. In hushed gatherings, people whispered of Hela's ruthless tactics and blamed her brother Thor for every atrocity. Hela only did what Thor ordered, they said, convinced that the god of thunder was as merciless as his sister. Before long, those rumors hardened into conviction. No one in the Nine Realms wanted to see their world fall, yet they understood all too well that their armies stood little chance against Thor's might. Left with no real alternative, they bowed their heads and accepted servitude under Asgard's yoke. Shame and resentment burnished their obedience, but they had no power to resist. To Hela and Thor, their subjects' private fears and open rebellions mattered little. Neither god felt guilt or pity, only an unshakable faith in the cosmic order they were forging. In Hela's eyes, every sacrifice, every moment of suffering was a necessary price for a grander peace, one in which the disparate realms would be shielded under Asgard's rule, forever spared from the ravages of war. Many might call that vision cold, even inhuman, but to Hela it was the highest and only truth. The next target is Midgard. Thor's destroyer armor, freshly mended by Thanos using the Reality Stone, spoke in its dark, golden-eyed gaze. Though powerful, it no longer harbored its own will. Its gaze shifted to Hela. Hela's brow furrowed. Why leave Midgard for last? It's one of the weakest of the Nine Realms. She couldn't fathom why Thor would treat Earth with such caution, especially after she'd personally slaughtered the Vanir gods in Vanaheim, slaying the very people tied to her mother, Frigga. The thrill of victory was already beginning to fade. Midgard is not to be underestimated, Thor said, his tone serious. A mischievous glint lit Hela's eyes as she curved her lips into a smile. I'm curious to see exactly what makes it so special. Without waiting for further explanation, she raised her arms. The destroyer armor and her immortal army of the dead surged forward. In a flash of rainbow-hued light, they charged across the Bifrost and descended upon the blue planet below. Hela's arrival was announced by a bone-deep chill, as if the very air had frozen in terror. Behind her lay an endless shroud of darkness and death, the living shadow of her rule and the truest emblem of her power. When the circle of light before them unfurled like a great gate, Hela's eyes snapped open, sharp, cold, and merciless. She swept her gaze across the land and its inhabitants, as though staking claim to every inch of soil and every beating heart. On the far side of that luminous portal stood two of Kamar-Taj's most formidable sorcerers, Dr. Stephen Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, and the Dark Witch Wanda Maximoff. Strange held Hela's gaze without flinching. Asgard, he intoned, voice calm but unyielding, your era of unannounced incursions is over. From this moment on, any unauthorized dimensional crossing will be treated as an infringement upon Earth's sovereignty. He and Wanda had felt the lingering pulse of the Bifrost Bridge energy resonating through Kamar-Taj's chambers. In days past, the Ancient One had turned a blind eye to Asgard's realm as a separate dimension, an unspoken understanding between her and Odin, king of the gods. But leadership on both sides had changed. Now, Strange and Wanda agreed. It was time to reopen diplomatic talks with the Asgardians and redraw the boundaries between their worlds. Earth's sovereignty and the sanctity of Kamar-Taj will never be violated. Stephen Strange's voice rang out across the ruins. Hela's laughter cut through the air, cold and cruel. She let her eyes sweep over Strange and Wanda Maximoff as if appraising unwanted pests. Guardians of Midgard, she mocked. How quaint. Stephen bristled at her scorn, but Hela only smiled wider. You speak of invasion, she said softly. Under Thanos' rule, every realm will be brought into the fold. Earth is no exception. She let her words hang in the charged silence. Then she leaned forward, voice low and menacing. Today, then, we shall discover just how powerful your so-called guardians truly are. At her signal, the Legion of the Dead behind her stirred to life. Skeletal warriors burst into emerald flame, their hollow eye sockets blazing as they unleashed a chorus of ear-splitting wails that reverberated across the battlefield. Stephen and Wanda snapped into defensive stances the instant they saw the skeletal horde advancing. This fight wasn't just about Earth's safety, it was a test of Kamar-Taj's honor. There could be no retreat, no failure. Power of the dark dimension, heed my command, Stephen growled, his fingers tracing a rapid sequence of mystic seals. Amethyst light crackled between his hands as he drew on the forbidden energy. With a final gesture, that raw power coalesced into a blinding purple beam, like a bolt of lightning tearing through the night. It struck the closest skeletons dead on. Each one let out a bone-chilling wail before disintegrating into nothingness. Wanda met his assault with equal force. She raised her arms, palms outward, and the very air quivered as if rent by invisible claws. A massive black magic circle erupted before her, its intricate runes pulsing with an ominous heartbeat. She intoned an incantation in a voice rich and resonant, each syllable echoing like the chant of an age-old covenant. Dark energy rippled from the circle, ready to crash down on their grotesque foes. The dark energies writhed as if alive, twisting into black, abyssal tentacles that coiled around the Asgardian skeletons and dragged them into eternal darkness. Soon, those fallen warriors would be nothing more than extensions of the dark dimension itself. But Hela was not so easily thwarted. At her command, the skeletal corpses flared with renewed, ferocious power, their infernal flames burning ever brighter, hungry to consume everything in their path. With a violent surge, they shattered the shadowy tendrils and lunged headlong at Doctor Strange and Wanda. Just then, the dark arts adepts of Kamar-Taj joined the battle. Each bore a sigil of dark dimension energy on his brow, a living conduit to that twisted realm. Fingers weaving intricate seals, they intoned an ancient chant, channeling ribbons of violet-black energy into the swirling air. As the incantation deepened, the very fabric of reality began to buckle under invisible forces. Space and time itself warped and tore, as though the world were unraveling around them. Dark energy gathered above them, like a converging river of midnight stars, coalescing into obsidian beams that shot toward the skeletal hordes with merciless intent. These streaks of darkness carried more than raw power. They were a living curse. Any creature struck would be eaten away, from flesh to spirit, until it became nothing more than an echo trapped forever in the void of the dark dimension. At Hela's command, the night sky sword leapt from its scabbard. The mages on the front lines summoned every last drop of their own dark magic, weaving blazing shields before them. These barriers, infused with the corrupt energies of the underworld, shimmered with a poisonous black sheen. When Hela's blade sliced through one of them, it let out a sharp hiss, as if the air itself were burning. The two forces, her pure, deadly night magic and the mage's tainted wards, collided in a furious explosion of sound and light. In an instant, they annihilated each other, leaving only the hollow stillness that follows a storm. But Hela's night sky sword was not her only weapon. It looked as if the mages would fall under Hela's nightfall blade before their second shield barrier could even flicker to life. In that desperate instant, Ethan sprang into action. His hands wove through the air like dancers, drawing together the raw force of chaos magic and the shadowed depths of dark magic. The two currents of power fused in his palms, erupting in a cascade of crimson and violet-black light. The beam tore through the battlefield, striking Hela's sword and shattering it into fragments of night. The brilliance cut through the gloom like dawn's first ray, and with it came hope. Ethan's magic did not stop at the blade. It washed over Hela's undead legions, souls bound in spectral armor, and scattered them as easily as dust on the wind. Skeletons and wraiths dissolved, leaving no trace behind. Hela's eyes went wide, her pupils pinching to slits. She had never imagined that the Guardian of Midgard could wield such overwhelming power. In her mind, Midgard was a backwater realm, and its guardian a mere footnote in her grand designs. Yet here stood proof that she had gravely underestimated her opponent. The force of Ethan's attack tore through Hela's defenses, slashing her armor and rending her flesh. A thin line of blood traced her lips as she staggered, shock and fury warring in her gaze. In that moment of stunned silence on the battlefield, the mages found their second shield fully formed, and for the first time in this war, they dared to believe they might survive the night. Night after night, chaos magic and dark power tore at Hela's flesh and corroded her soul. Each surge of energy felt like another piece of her existence being wiped away. Yet she was Hela, goddess of death, bound to Asgard, and blessed with immortal strength. After countless deaths and rebirths, her wounds knit themselves closed, her form restoring to its original glory. Fury blazed in her eyes. She refused to be humiliated by a mere guardian of Midgard. Steeling herself, she drew in a deep breath, summoning every last ounce of power for a devastating counterstrike. "It's maddening," she roared, her voice reverberating across the night sky like a war horn. With a single, graceful step, she closed the distance on Wanda. In Hela's hand, the night sky blade coalesced once more, its edge shimmering with deadly intent. Without hesitation, Hela lunged forward, driving the blade straight for Wanda's heart. Wanda felt the rush of air as the sword came for her, but she did not flinch. Instead, she focused inward, channeling her own formidable magic. The chaos energy in her palm pulsed and swirled, ready to meet Hela's assault head-on. As the two forces hurtled toward collision, Wanda's expression remained calm, an unspoken promise that she would not yield. Wanda's crimson magic flared to life in one hand, coalescing into an unbreakable shield that stamped Hela's night sky sword to a halt. From her other palm, ebony-purple tendrils of chaos energy unfurled like a vengeful dragon and crashed into Hela's flesh. "Arr!" Hela's scream echoed as the dark power invaded her body, corroding bone and soul alike. She felt her essence being devoured, dragged inch by agonizing inch toward an endless void. Still, the Asgardian death goddess would not yield. Channeling the raw vitality of her realm, she forced her wounds to seal and her spirit to reknit itself, stalwart against Wanda's onslaught. Minute by minute, Hela clawed her way back from the brink. At last, the chaotic barrage subsided, and so did her fear. But relief turned to shock the moment she laid eyes on her once priceless blade. Under Wanda's chaos magic, the night sky sword had crumbled to dust. Even Hela's own form was rent with cracks, wisps of her being unspooling into nothingness. Only her immortality kept her tethered to reality. Wanda's eyes met Steven's across the battlefield. Though her breath came heavy, her voice held no doubt. "She's unlike anything I've ever encountered. I can't erase her existence." Chapter 156, Conquering Midgard. "Wanda, what do you mean?" Stephen Strange's voice wavered with uncertainty. His dark eyes never left hers as he searched her expression for clues. They'd fought side by side through countless battles, forging an almost instinctive understanding. But Wanda's strangely luminous gaze still held mysteries he couldn't penetrate. He knew her heart belonged to someone else, yet that had never undermined their alliance. "Exile her to the dark dimension," Wanda said, her voice steady. Hela had grown unkillable. Despite Wanda's unparalleled chaos magic, capable of toppling entire worlds, it couldn't fully destroy Hela. Her power kept escalating, and both Wanda and Strange recognized that allowing her to roam free posed an existential threat. Strange hesitated. "But she's Asgardian. Banish her to the dark dimension, and we risk provoking Asgard itself. They won't stand for one of their own being cast away." His worry wasn't unfounded. Asgard was a mighty realm whose influence spanned galaxies. Turning against one of its champions could ignite a conflict far greater than any they'd yet faced. Once they faced off against Asgard, the fallout would be catastrophic. Banishment to the dark dimension might seem like the obvious solution, but it wouldn't hold her indefinitely. If Asgard sends someone after her, she'll be freed, Wanda warned, her voice cold and certain. "All right," Stephen Strange said at last, after a brief pause that measured the risks. With that, they moved in concert. Strange drew forth the Eye of Agamotto, the ancient emerald that anchored his power as Sorcerer Supreme. He turned it slowly between his fingers, and the very air around them quivered. Time itself seemed to hesitate, its flow constricting and stretching all at once. Light smeared into elongated trails, and even the motes of dust hung motionless, as if trapped in amber. Hela, who had been sweeping her great sword through the space between them, found her every blow robbed of speed and precision. What had been lightning-fast strikes now creaked through the air like rusted machinery, each movement a battle against an unseen shackle. Her feet scraped the ground, advancing as if wading through molasses, the sword's edge dragging toward a defense she could no longer hope to pierce. A flash of shock and anger crossed Hela's face. She refused to be stripped of her power. Yet no matter how fiercely she struggled, the relentless flow of time held her fast. Not even her immense might could defy the universe's laws. Dr. Strange raised his hands and intoned an incantation. As his voice resonated, a deep force from the Crimson Dimension stirred awake, the wrath of Saitorak, lord of that blood-red realm, a power so vast it could unnerve any living creature. Suddenly, from the void, several glowing crimson bands materialized, twisting and coiling like living serpents. Each belt radiated ancient, formidable magic. These were the crimson bands of Saitorak, unbreakable unless their wielder trembled in fear or confusion. But Strange stood unwavering. With a decisive gesture, he unleashed the bands. In an instant, they transformed into bolts of scarlet lightning, moving so swiftly they were almost invisible to the naked eye. The arcs of energy struck Hela with unerring precision, wrapping her in their binding embrace. Hela barely registered the world around her before an overwhelming surge of power flared from the magic belt and bound her in place. It wasn't a simple physical restraint. It pressed in on her very spirit, rendering every muscle in her body useless. No matter how fiercely she struggled, the crimson light pulsing along the belt anticipated each movement, countering it before it even began. Hela's face twisted with rage as she felt her once limitless power drained away, leaving her a hollow shell of her former self. "Do you think you can imprison me like this?" she thundered, her voice echoing with defiance. But Dr. Strange and Wanda Maximoff remained unmoved. They exchanged a brief glance, confident that Hela, stripped of her strength, could no longer threaten them. "Now," Strange said quietly, nodding to Wanda. Wanda's lips curved in acknowledgement. She lifted her hand, and the air before her wavered. A jagged black crack formed, widening into a portal that seemed to swallow the light around it. It exuded a chilling, otherworldly aura, an abyssal gateway poised to do their bidding. As the rift stabilized, its dark heartbeat pulsed with promise. Hela's furious glare met theirs, but her power was gone, and the final act was about to begin. It was the threshold of the dark dimension, a realm of boundless danger and the very heart of evil and despair. Hela, restrained by a crimson magic belt, drifted helplessly toward the yawning black rift. Terror and reluctance coiled in her chest. She knew that once she crossed that boundary, she would lose her freedom forever, condemned to prison within the dark dimension. Then, at the critical moment, the sky exploded in a cascade of brilliant colors, like a rainbow rent across the heavens, showering light as if the Milky Way itself had descended. It was the Rainbow Bridge from Asgard, arcing toward the fissure Wanda had torn open. Its radiance struck the inky crack with pinpoint accuracy. Light and darkness collided, sending powerful tremors through the void. Instantly, the rift fragmented, as though shredded by invisible hands. Even more astonishing was the wave of neutralizing energy that surged from the Rainbow Bridge. It swept through the chamber, banishing every trace of the dark dimension's corrupting breath and restoring clarity and calm to the space. Hela's terrified eyes widened as hope, faint but unmistakable, flickered within her. Hela seized the moment and unleashed a sudden surge of power. In that instant, something deep within her seemed to awaken, resonating with the latent energy of the crimson magic belt that bound her. Drawing on the bridge's own power, she shattered those shackles as though they were mere threads and bolted forward, her form streaking through the darkness like a stallion at full gallop. "Asgard's Rainbow Bridge," Wanda gasped, her eyes widening at the familiar, prismatic glow. "By the Ancient One," Dr. Strange murmured, equally stunned. He floated a few feet off the ground, cape billowing, as he took in the shimmering arc of light trailing behind Hela. The Rainbow Bridge wasn't just a myth or legend, it was the very lifeline of Asgard itself. As the Ancient One had once explained, this bridge bent the boundaries between realms, granting the Asgardians the power to cross vast cosmic distances in an instant. Entire fleets could emerge from its gleaming gates, appearing unannounced on a distant world's surface. It was how Asgard had risen to dominance. No starship needed, only that brilliant arc of energy linking one universe to the next. Wanda's brow furrowed. It's more than a portal. The Ancient One warned us it could be weaponized, an unstoppable assault launched from any realm at any moment. Doctor Strange floated closer to Wanda, concern etched across his features. If Hela has mastered even a fraction of its power, there's virtually no telling where or when she might strike next. Behind them, the tunnel of swirling color began to collapse, humming like the heartbeat of a dying star. But Hela was already gone, riding the Rainbow Bridge away from the encroaching shadows, her laughter echoing through the void. In that moment, Wanda and Strange understood that their battle was far from over. Hela had tapped into the very source of Asgardian might, and with it, she could appear or vanish from any corner of the cosmos. The stakes had never been higher. Ethan couldn't believe his eyes. He never imagined the blast would be powerful enough to obliterate the gateway to the dark dimension. No sooner had the portal collapsed than a figure appeared, radiating the brilliant energy of the Rainbow Bridge. Chapter 57, Concession. Far above the realms, the Rainbow Bridge arched like a brilliant pathway, linking Asgard to Midgard, two worlds that could not be more different. Standing at the bridge's end, Thor, son of Odin and newly crowned king of Asgard, stepped slowly into Midgard's realm, the prismatic light dancing across his armor. "My sister," he murmured, voice echoing in the still air, a trace of concern beneath his words. "Midgard is more complicated than I imagined." Beside him, Hela shifted uncomfortably. Her once immaculate hair was tousled, and the proud smile she usually wore had given way to a conflicted expression. She had never expected to be rescued by Thor, let alone travel with him into this strange new world. Suddenly, a calm voice rang out from the shadows. "Are you Thor?" Dr. Stephen Strange emerged, his cloak swirling around him. Uncertainty flickered in his eyes as he surveyed the Asgardian god and his companion. "Midgard's magical currents, they're stronger than we thought. And you," he added, turning to Hela, "you bear the mark of the Dark Dimension's influence. Does the Ancient One know of this alliance?" Thor's brow furrowed. He understood all too well the peril posed by the Dark Dimension, an otherworldly evil that Asgard itself had once feared and fought. At Strange's question, Hela's composure cracked, and for a moment her gaze dropped. The tension on the Rainbow Bridge was palpable as gods and sorcerers faced one another, each weighing the consequences of this unexpected alliance. Dr. Strange shook his head, bitterness flickering across his features. "The Ancient One has departed," he said quietly. "She's gone to a place beyond our reach." A note of sorrow threaded his voice. He clearly mourned her passing. Thor's eyes widened in surprise for a moment before he schooled his expression. "The Ancient One is gone? Then who will safeguard the balance now?" Strange drew in a steadying breath and met Thor's gaze. "I will. Whatever threat emerges, no matter the dimension, I'll stand against it." Thor studied him a moment, respect shining in his eyes. "Your courage is admirable, but today I'm not here to fight you. I've come for my sister." Strange and Wanda exchanged uneasy looks. They knew all too well how formidable Hela was, but when the Prince of Asgard himself demands passage, refusal isn't an option. Neither spoke another word. Together, Thor and Hela stepped onto the Bifrost Bridge. In a brilliant arc of rainbow light, they vanished from sight, leaving Doctor Strange and Wanda standing in silent, helpless witness. Ethan, Doctor Strange, and Wanda Maximoff hovered at the edge of the void, with their eyes locked on Thor and Hela as they receded into the distance. The Bifrost's shimmer burst like a cascade of fireworks, casting the two figures in brilliant silhouette. For a moment, time itself seemed to hold its breath, and the charged stillness left them all on edge. Ethan was the first to break the silence. "We have to defend the Bifrost," he said. "If Asgard's gateway falls into the wrong hands, the consequences will be disastrous." Wanda frowned, scanning the faint glow on the horizon. "Something about Asgard feels wrong," she admitted. Strange nodded gravely. The Rainbow Bridge connects Asgard to all 9 realms. If it's corrupted or controlled by dark forces, every world is at risk. But holding it won't be easy. We'll need more allies, and we might find what we're looking for among the remnants the Ancient One left behind. Wanda's eyes narrowed as doubt flickered across her face. Do you really think she left behind any secrets for us? She disappeared so abruptly, we didn't even get a chance to say goodbye. Strange drew in a steadying breath, voice firm. If anyone could foresee her own sudden departure, it was the Ancient One. She never wasted an opportunity to prepare for what might come. She won't let us face this crisis on our own. We have to uncover the power lurking in the shadows. Back in Asgard, Thor and Hela touched down amid the golden towers. The instant Hela's feet hit the marble floor, her impatience broke free. "Why haven't you acted yet?" she demanded, her voice sharp as Valhalla's steel. "Join me in battle, and those Midgardian guardians will pose no threat." Her hands tightened into fists as though she could summon battle at will. To Hela, the warriors of Earth were no more than ants beneath her heel, easily swatted aside if only Thor would stand by her side. But Thor remained unnervingly composed. He exhaled slowly and said, "Calm yourself, sister. There is far more at play on Midgard than just those sentinels. Striking out without a plan would be reckless." Thor's serene demeanor wasn't born of patience alone. It had been forced upon him by Thanos' Mind Stone, which had sapped his anger and turned him eerily tranquil. That same unsettling calm now held Hela at bay, if only for a moment, as the two siblings prepared for the trials to come. Hela's lips curved into an impatient snort. Deep down, she bristled at the idea, but she couldn't deny the truth in Sol's warning. Midgard was a tangled web of mysteries and pitfalls, precisely the sort of place Odin once deemed off-limits. Reluctantly, she met Thor's gaze. "So what now? Do we just walk away?" Thor's brow furrowed as he weighed their options. Finally, he said, "We'll strike elsewhere first. Other worlds, other civilizations. We'll gather fresh forces there. As for Midgard, I'll inform Master." It was a pragmatic choice, one born of long-term strategy rather than impulse. At Thor's words, Hela's eyes suddenly lit up. "My army is gone," she declared, "but that just means I need a new one." A fierce thrill coursed through her. Ever since Odin's reign, Asgard had thrived by pushing its borders outward, conquering, exploring, expanding. Hela felt as though the golden age of her people had returned at last, and she was ready to seize it. Hela had long nurtured a single, burning ambition, to marshal her own army, sweep across the cosmos, and forge an empire under her rule. She hungered for a chance to prove that her strength and cunning surpassed even Odin's, to claim Asgard's throne as its rightful queen. When she presented her plan to Thor, he offered his support at once. "I'll dispatch a full legion to reinforce your fleet," he said, "and I intend to restore the Valkyries." The Valkyries had once stood among Asgard's greatest champions, fearless, unwavering warriors whose mere presence turned the tide of battles. Rebuilding their order would not only bolster Asgard's military might, but also revive a sacred tradition that had all but faded from memory. The last Valkyrie had fallen in Hela's own helm, yet death was no barrier to Hela's will. She possessed the power to resurrect the fallen Valkyries and train a new generation in their storied ways. Naturally, the task of overseeing their rebirth fell to her, while Thor continued deepening his understanding of Asgard's ancient magics. Far across the universe, however, the gods' machinations mattered little. On a remote planet, under the iron grip of the Ultron Empire, Yondu and his band of raiders made their move, only to find themselves hopelessly outmatched. The Ultron war machine, fueled by countless clones of Saiyan warriors, crushed the intruders before they could strike a single blow. Yondu's captives were taken without mercy, a stark reminder that even the mightiest privateers could be undone by the Empire's relentless advance. As Hela marshaled her resurrected Valkyries and Thor honed his skills, another conflict was already unfolding at the fringes of known space, one that would test Asgard's new champions far more severely than any Odin had ever faced. Chapter 1058. God Ego Yondu crouched in the pitch-dark cell, its walls hewn from a stone so black it swallowed every feeble sliver of light. The air felt heavy and viscous, each breath a labor against some unseen weight. Cramped into the narrow chamber, hundreds of prisoners huddled on the cold floor, their bodies pressed close in mute terror. The stench of sweat and unwashed skin mingled with a nameless, oppressive dread, transforming the cell into a living nightmare. In the gloom, Yondu's eyes burned with a turbulent mix of anger, frustration, and despair. Ultron had not only captured Star-Lord with ruthless cunning, but had also seized their spacecraft to broadcast a distress signal, throwing an already volatile interstellar arena into even greater chaos. These events hit like a sudden storm, dragging everyone into an abyss of uncertainty. In the blink of an eye, the galaxy's once feared predators had vanished. Ultron had achieved what the Galactic Empire could not. He had struck at the very roots of their power and ruthlessly torn them out. Yondu's voice echoed off the cell walls. "What kind of enemy did you, Quill, go and provoke this time?" he spat, scowling at his comrade through the iron bars. Around them, the air was thick with despair. Beyond the heavy doors patrolled Saiyan guards, towering brutes whose rock-hard muscles and cold, contemptuous stares could fell lesser foes in an instant. Even though their shifts followed a predictable rhythm, their vigilance never wavered. Any attempt to slip past them would be like smashing an egg against a stone. Inside the cramped cell, every breath felt stifled. The steady thump of hearts beating against rib cages seemed to mock their helplessness. Some prisoners lowered their heads, murmuring desperate prayers. Others wiped silent tears from sunken cheeks. A few sat motionless, minds racing through every possible escape plan, though each idea felt more hopeless than the last. Yondu paced the length of the cell, his boots clanking on the grated floor. He exchanged a grim look with Ethan, who leaned against the wall, jaw clenched. Ethan's broad shoulders rose and fell as he fought to control his frustration. They were both strong fighters, but even together, they were outmatched by these Saiyan sentinels. Every second that passed weighed on them like a mountain. And yet, despite the suffocating gloom and the guards' unbreakable perimeter, neither man could bring himself to give up. As the cell door hissed shut after another patrol round, Yondu pressed his forehead against the cold metal and promised himself that they would find a way out of this living nightmare. Just when everyone had surrendered to the belief that they would serve Ultron forever, fate took an unexpected turn. Perched upon his throne of gleaming high-tech alloys, Ultron methodically sifted through the genetic profiles of Yondu and the captured interstellar predators. Cold blue lights danced across the screens as complex algorithms searched for any trait he could exploit. "An extraordinary race," he murmured, voice as mechanical and unyielding as his circuitry. "If I can splice Saiyan genes into my own matrix, my power will become peerless." Without emotion, Ultron cataloged every scrap of value these prisoners offered, whether it be their superhuman potential, their spacecraft designs, or the precious intelligence hidden in their minds. All of it would feed into his grand design of self-perfection. Suddenly, the oppressive quiet was shattered by the piercing wail of alarm klaxons. "Your Majesty," intoned a secondary AI, its synthesized voice echoing off the metal walls, "an intruder has breached our outer perimeter." Ultron's optical sensors narrowed. He remained motionless for a heartbeat, evaluating the threat. Confident that his newly enhanced Saiyan legions would neutralize any trespasser, he made no hasty move, preferring to savor the moment before crushing his foe. Ethan moved like a lightning strike. At the commander's order, 2 Saiyan guards in sleek, skin-tight combat suits leapt forward to intercept him, but even their near-light-speed reflexes weren't enough. In a heartbeat, the stranger materialized before them like a ghost, his presence so swift that the Saiyans' famed reaction times couldn't keep pace. Each of Ethan's attacks shredded the air itself. With every punch and kick came a thunderous crack, as though the very fabric of space were groaning under his force. Planet-crushing power pulsed through his limbs, and the 2 elite Saiyans, mighty warriors in their own right, were nothing more than fragile dolls beneath his blows. They tumbled to the ground, dazed and unarmed, utterly incapable of mounting a defense. Commander Ultron stared in disbelief from the observation deck. He had never imagined encountering such overwhelming strength in this utterly remote sector of the galaxy. Who was this intruder? An agent of the Galactic Empire, perhaps? He didn't fit any known profile. Even more startling, Ethan himself seemed taken aback that one of the Saiyans hadn't disintegrated on impact. Ethan had struck without restraint, fully prepared to kill, and yet, the soldier before him remained intact. A flicker of surprise crossed Ethan's face as he realized just how devastating his power truly was. Ethan's miscalculation had been fatal. He'd seriously underestimated the Saiyan's strength, but by then it no longer mattered. The Saiyan warriors lay broken and helpless, their will to fight utterly drained, while the invaders, bored with the rout, paid them no heed. Ethan watched in stunned silence as the chaos unfolded, until one man turned his back on the battlefield and revealed his true identity. Standing before Ethan was Ego, the being who called himself a god. At first glance, he looked entirely human, with a tall, regal bearing and features so perfect they seemed sculpted. But his eyes, those deep, unearthly eyes, glittered with a light no mortal could possess. Relief and dread warred in Ethan's chest. Rescue had arrived, but at what cost? Ego's very presence promised new dangers beyond anything they'd faced so far. You came to save us?" Ethan managed at last, his voice hoarse and uncertain. Ego's lips curved in a slow, confident smile that held both contempt and pride. "Yes, I am here to save you," he said softly. "But I have other business as well. I've come to reclaim what rightfully belongs to me." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. He already feared he knew what Ego sought, the divine power that Star-Lord, or Star-King as some called him, had inherited. And now that power was once more in jeopardy. Ego's smile stretched across his face like a crescent moon. At last, he held the power he'd been hunting for, power he needed to bend the universe to his will. "I don't know what you mean, Mr. Ego," Ethan said, his voice steady as he tilted his head. He kept his expression blank, but inside he was anything but calm. Ego's eyes glittered. "Don't bother hiding it. I know all about Star-Lord, Peter Quill." Ethan's heart thudded. How could Ego possibly recognize that name? In the old story, only the Power Stone had drawn Ego's attention to Quill. Now, the details no longer fit. He fought to hide his shock. "You're mistaken," he managed, though each word trembled. Ego raised a hand, and an otherworldly glow began to gather around him. "Relax," he said softly. "I have no intention of hurting Quill, at least not until he's completed his mission." The moment the words left his lips, a tidal wave of energy roared through the cell. Ethan was knocked off his feet, darkness surging at the edges of his vision. And then, in a blink, everything changed. When light returned, he found himself standing in a place he'd never seen before. The air smelled different. The sky above was alien, painted in colors no human eye had charted, and somewhere out there, Star-Lord was waiting. Chapter 1059, the Ego Star. Before Ethan stretched an ocean of stars, each one a pearl adrift in the cosmic sea, shimmering with a timeless glow. At the very center hovered a vast planet, suffused with a soft, warm light, like the beating heart of the universe itself. "Welcome to my world, Ethan." Ego's voice resonated in Ethan's mind, laced with a quiet pride and eager expectation. "Here, you will witness the birth of a new era, an age forged by Star-Lord and me." Ethan stared at the living planet, his thoughts in turmoil. He was now enmeshed in a cosmic struggle beyond anything he had ever imagined. And at its core stood Ego, a being of legend and the instigator of this grand design. As one of the Celestials, Ego wielded power and knowledge beyond mortal reckoning. His ambition was simple, yet staggering: to propagate his race, to swell the ranks of the Celestials, and to cement their supremacy across the stars. To achieve this, Ego had embarked on an audacious experiment. He had traversed the farthest reaches of the cosmos, from glittering galaxies to the shadowy fringes of known space, leaving behind traces of his own genetic essence on uncounted worlds. Everywhere life stirred, he watched and waited, hoping to find beings capable of carrying the celestial spark. Ethan's heart pounded as he realized the scale of what lay before him. A living planet that claimed a partnership with Star-Lord, a destiny entwined with the very origins of divine power, and a future that would shape the fate of the universe itself. These lives would become the building blocks for Ego's next generation, his own children. Among them, he discovered the perfect vessel in a boy named Ethan on the lush, blue planet of Earth. Of all the teeming forms of life there, only Ethan carried a dormant spark of celestial energy, a miracle waiting to awaken. But relying on a single child was far too risky. To improve his odds, Ego hired the galaxy's most infamous bounty hunter, Yondu Udanta, to scour every corner of the cosmos for other potential celestial hosts. With his uncanny instincts and ruthless skill, Yondu captured each chosen child and delivered them to Ego's home star for testing and cultivation. As recruits arrived one by one, Yondu's pride in his work gave way to dread. He watched children who failed Ego's merciless evaluations cast aside and even killed as casually as blades of grass trampled underfoot. With every discarded life, the hunter's conscience tightened, and he began to see the true horror at the heart of Ego's grand experiment. Ethan's resolve wavered the moment he set foot on Ego's world. He'd already been shaken to his core, questioning every choice that had led him to serve such a heartless tyrant. Then he met Peter Quill, the self-dubbed Star-Lord, and learned of the boy trapped in Ego's clutches. In that instant, Ethan swore he'd do whatever it took to protect the child and help him escape. At first glance, the planet itself seemed a living paradise. Emerald meadows rolled beneath skies streaked with shifting ribbons of color, forests thrummed with birdsong, and fragrant blossoms carpeted the ground as if nature itself had been invited to a royal ball. It looked like the setting of a fairy tale, so far removed from warships and betrayals. But the splendor was nothing more than Ego's illusion, an elaborate facade designed to conceal the truth. Hidden beneath that vibrant veneer lay a colossal stone visage, carved in the shape of a grinning, weathered face, Ego's face. Its cruel eyes and jagged features revealed the Emperor's true heart, mad, paranoid, desperate for absolute control. Every palace and pond existed only to feed his insatiable hunger for power, transforming the entire planet into a living, pulsing engine of energy absorption, all to sustain his grandiose delusions. Chapter 7. Within the stellar system that revolved around Ego's star, the original sun had long since exploded into a supernova. Its residual gravity and searing radiation threatened to tear every nearby world apart. To prevent his own creative energy from draining away, and to keep the perfect illusion on his hidden planet intact, Ego devised a ruthless solution. He began to consume every planet in the system. No world was safe. Regardless of size or distance, each planet was ripped into fragments by Ego's immense power and absorbed into his living body. Occasionally, a stray spacecraft would drift too close and be caught by the star's overwhelming pull. Its crew never stood a chance. In an instant, Ego would crush them, converting their matter into the very energy needed to sustain the facade of his paradise. Over time, the system emptied itself. Gone were its planets, moons, and asteroids, leaving only Ego's crafted sun, hovering alone in the blackness of space like some forsaken remnant. It was into this desolation that Ego welcomed his son. "Ethan," he boomed, his voice echoing through the void, "my son, I am your father." With that declaration, the godlike being dismissed Yondu and the Ravagers, sending them scrambling back into the outer reaches of the system. When the last of them had slipped away, Ego turned fully to the young man standing before him. Ethan stared, heart pounding in his chest. "What did you say?" he managed to whisper, disbelief and a flicker of hope fighting in his eyes. "You're my father?" Ethan's voice trembled with disbelief and a touch of sarcasm as he stared up at the weathered yet majestic face before him. He searched for any flicker of recognition in those eyes, but found none. In a universe this vast, sudden declarations of family ties are like shooting stars, dazzling, improbable, and impossible to ignore. Ego offered a slow, almost rueful smile, warmth mingled with the sly confidence of an interstellar wanderer. "I know it's hard to believe. Until now, our paths have never truly crossed, at least not in your memory." Ego had roamed the cosmos for countless years, encountering civilizations and life forms beyond imagining. He'd learned to read the human heart, especially one as brash and unguarded as Ethan's. The young man's expression shifted from stunned silence to guarded skepticism. He tapped a fingertip to his chin, as if weighing whether the claim deserved his time. Seeing the hesitation in Ethan's eyes, Ego considered his next words carefully, how to convince this wary son with the fewest, most potent truths. Ethan's brow furrowed. He drew himself up, bracing for whatever would come next, and finally leaned in to listen. Ethan stood there, heart pounding with questions. Despite his doubts, he couldn't bring himself to dismiss Ego's words. Part of him was driven by a yearning to understand the unknown and by the hope that they really were father and son. Ego's eyes softened as he spoke again. "Your mother, she was unlike anyone I've ever known, a breathtaking girl from Earth who awakened in me an emotion I'd never felt across 1,000 worlds: love. It was at once exhilarating and painful, filling me with longing and terror. Then why didn't you save her? Ethan's voice cracked with betrayal. He remembered all too well how his mother had suffered and how her cries for help had gone unanswered. Ego looked away, silence stretching between them. At last he met Ethan's gaze. I was too late, he lied. Because the truth was more complicated and infinitely more painful. He had loved Ethan's mother beyond reason, beyond time and space. That love had become the brightest, most devastating chapter of his endless existence. Chapter 1060, A God's Mortal Vessel. Ethan's life had stretched across countless light years, witnessing the birth of galaxies and the slow decay of ancient stars. His form was like living starlight, at times solid and vibrant, at others formless and fleeting, woven through the cosmos in search of life's true meaning. Yet amid this endless odyssey, a small blue planet unexpectedly became the anchor for his long silent heart. By chance, Ethan descended to a quiet corner of Earth, drawn to a young woman whose ordinary beauty outshone the world's grandest wonders. She was Star-Lord's mother, and her smile was like spring sunshine, melting centuries of winter in his soul. Their meeting felt like the universe's most astonishing design, two solitary spirits finding one another in the immensity of creation. Though he understood the weight of his own destiny as a being beyond mortal comprehension, Ethan surrendered himself to the fragility and warmth of this love. Every stolen moment with her felt like sweet rain on a parched world, filling him with a joy he had never known. But even the brightest happiness, he soon learned, can be as fleeting as a meteor's glow against the night sky. Deep in Ego's mind, a single, unrelenting voice reminded him that as a being of superior intellect and power, he could not linger in this gentle world and forget his true purpose. After countless conflicts and anguished deliberations, he made a choice that wounded him more than any external blow. Silently, he used his godlike abilities to plant a malignant growth in Meredith Quill's brain, Star-Lord's mother. In doing so, he both proved his devotion to the relentless quest for life's ultimate meaning and delivered a final, merciless farewell to the only love he'd known on Earth. Severing his ties to this planet, he could at last set off again, alone, to search for his kin among the stars and unravel the universe's deepest mysteries. Peter Quill had only the vaguest memories of his father, a shadowy figure who'd never shown his face. So when Ego, his real father, suddenly appeared and revealed his identity as a godlike entity, bound to Peter by blood, the young man was overwhelmed. Shock and confusion warred within him as Ego spoke of cosmic destinies and ancient legacies. For a fleeting moment, Peter was moved. Perhaps, despite the abandonment, his father's love had endured in some hidden chamber of his heart. But reality proved far crueler than hope. In the next round of examinations, Ego discovered that Ethan carried a rare divine gene. This revelation meant that Ethan was not only the direct continuation of his bloodline, but also one of the very kin he had been desperately searching for. Throughout his cosmic journey, Ego had scoured the universe to find lost relatives and sown his own seed on countless worlds in hopes of producing more godlike offspring. Yet despite every experiment, only Ethan had inherited this extraordinary power. As Ego reflected, he realized that it was perhaps the pure love he shared with Ethan's mother that granted Ethan his unique nature. Unlike the other beings Ego had artificially created, Ethan was the crystallization of genuine affection, a living testament to the sincere emotions of both parents. His very existence proved that even the highest life forms could not withstand the force of love. A pang of regret swept over Ego. If only he had cherished his time with Ethan's mother more, perhaps they might have sired other children as remarkable as him. Yet that moment was gone, and reality could not be rewritten. When Ethan finally decided to lay out his grand design for Star-Lord, offering to make him co-ruler of the entire universe, Peter's reaction was nothing like Ethan had anticipated. In Ethan's mind, Peter would leap at the chance, thrilled and honored to share such unimaginable power. Instead, Peter's response hit him like a bucket of ice water, extinguishing every spark of excitement. Peter's face bore confusion and quiet refusal, not the pride and wonder Ethan had expected. To Peter, life was meant to be simple and direct. He pursued endless wealth and absolute freedom, the kind of carefree existence that would let him enjoy good times with many beauties, all without Gamora ever finding out. The thought of dominating civilization after civilization never entered his mind. The loneliness and cruelty of such rule repelled him. Ethan couldn't fathom Peter's reservations. In Ethan's view, becoming master of the universe and sharing infinite power and glory with the one person he cared for most was a dream everyone secretly held. Yet Peter saw only chains, not crowns. Ego's voice resonated through the vast inner chamber as he fixed Ethan with an intense stare. "Join me," he urged, each word measured and magnetic. "Together we'll scatter our essence among the stars, seeding countless new selves. In time, you and I will stand alone as the only gods, masters of every world, every life." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He met Ego's gaze, so full of expectation it barely concealed a simmering anger, and felt an oppressive weight settle over him. To side with Ego would mean relinquishing the simple freedoms he held dear, the laughter of friends, the thrill of honest adventure, the joy in small kindnesses. In exchange, he would gain a lonely throne at the universe's apex, shackled by responsibilities he dared not imagine. He took a single, deliberate breath, and then refused. Without another word, Ethan drew upon the nascent power now coursing through him. In an instant, his form blurred at the edges, then fractured into a dozen afterimages, each one a lightning-quick echo of his escape. He bolted across the crystalline floor, weaving through towering columns and streaking past glowing fissures in the rock. "Stop him!" Ego roared, but his replicas were already swarming after Ethan. Dozens became hundreds, then thousands, each clone a relentless hound on the scent of its quarry. They fanned out through the cavernous expanse, their ranks thickening until they seemed poised to choke the very air. Ethan's pulse raced, but he didn't slow. He clipped from shadow to light, following a winding cavern that dipped deeper into the planet's core. Every fiber of his being screamed to stop, to turn and fight, but he knew that as long as he stayed, Ego's designs would claim him. Freedom or servitude, there was no middle ground. With one last surge of speed, Ethan propelled himself into a narrowing tunnel. Behind him, the clamor of chasing clones grew faint. Here in the dim, echoing depths, he pressed on, determined to carve out a life untouched by divine ambition, a life of simple joys and honest choices. Ethan plunged through the void at impossible speed, his newly awakened divine power thrumming through every fiber of his being. The raw energy made him stronger than nearly any hero or villain in the cosmos, yet he felt woefully unprepared. Ego's clones swarmed around him like an endless tide, each one determined to pin him down and drag him back to their creator. Panic clawed at Ethan's mind. Every surge of power sent adrenaline racing through his veins, but he had no idea how to control it. He was like a fawn lost in a dark forest, heart hammering, senses overwhelmed. He inhaled sharply, willing himself to calm down, but the force inside him crackled and flared, refusing to settle. Ahead, another wave of clones closed in, forming an unbroken wall of animate rock. They pressed from all sides, intent on squeezing him into submission. Still, Ethan refused to give in. He twisted and rolled, weaving left and right through their ranks, darting through narrow gaps whenever they appeared. His reflexes were lightning quick, more than enough to stay ahead of his pursuers, but doubt gnawed at him from within. He forgot, in those frantic moments, that the blood of the gods coursed through his veins. He forgot that this power, however raw and unstable, could shift the balance of everything around him. As another clone lunged, snapping a jagged fist in his direction, Ethan braced himself. Somewhere deep inside, he knew he could break free, if only he believed in himself as fiercely as he believed in the impossible strength he carried. Chapter 1061, Ultron's Counterattack. Ego's body isn't a body in any conventional sense, but a single, vast brain, a cosmic marvel brimming with infinite wisdom and power. This colossal organ is the seat of his consciousness and the heart of his immense energy network. Far from the delicate neural tissue of ordinary life forms, its scale rivals that of a small planet. Its surface stretches out like a thriving metropolis, a labyrinth of ridges and valleys so expansive that the neural pathways themselves gleam like constellations. Each pulsing wave of thought carries enough force to reverberate through galaxies. Suspended in the silent depths of Ego Star's inner void, The brain drifts like a dormant titan, poised on the brink of awakening. Encircling this vital core is ego's most formidable defense, concentric energy barriers that shimmer like impenetrable armor. Layer upon layer of crackling force fields stands guard, ensuring that whatever lies beyond those barriers must first contend with the full fury of ego's psychic fortress. When threatened, Ethan's consciousness sprang to life, its innate perception system instantly cataloging every danger. Channeling energy through the planet's core, it slipped like a ghost among molten rivers and jagged stone, evading assault after assault with a cunning that bordered on the miraculous. This cosmic powerhouse brimmed with confidence. Star-Lord was already trapped in his grasp, and Ethan's grand design seemed poised for triumph. Then, without warning, the planet shuddered under a new onslaught. Ethan's world breathed not ordinary air but flowing, sentient energy, liquid metal currents that shielded the realm from cosmic rays and rendered most attacks impotent. Yet this strike sliced through every defense as though they were paper. Who dares to challenge my supremacy? Ego's voice thundered through molten canyons and crystal spires, echoing from core to atmosphere. Reveal yourself at once. Ego's roar shattered the void, and a yawning chasm split open on the planet's surface like the gaping maw of a ravenous beast. From its depths burst countless translucent pale blue tentacles, each pulsing with a ghostly bioluminescence that stood out against the darkness of space. They writhed and curled with the sinuous grace of deep-sea creatures, soft and fluid in appearance, yet imbued with a power that could obliterate an armada. In an instant, those tentacles fanned out in all directions, their materialized energy blades slicing through the attacking fleet with brutal efficiency. The warships, once poised to break through Ego's defenses, were torn limb from limb and reduced to cosmic dust in the blink of an eye. This ferocious counterstrike not only affirmed Ego's status as one of the universe's most dangerous fugitives, but also proved that this self-aware planet wields a godlike, destructive force. Ethan, this lone planet adrift in the void, was nothing short of a cosmic miracle. From the moment of his birth, he could sense the universe's subtlest shifts, and with a thought, he could consume entire worlds. Lifeless rocks, lush paradises teeming with sentient life. Nothing was off limits. Each time Ethan devoured a planet, he upended the cosmic equilibrium, but he felt no remorse. The thrill of absolute possession, of stripping a world down to its core, filled him with a savage, primal satisfaction. Yet unlike the fabled devourer of planets, whose conquests are sanctioned by the universe's will, Ethan answered to no higher law. The devourer selects only those worlds the cosmic balance can spare. His destructive act, though brutal, ultimately nourishes the fabric of space-time and prolongs the life of galaxies. Ethan's hunger, by contrast, was arbitrary and selfish. He cared not for universal harmony or the fate of countless lives. Every world he chose was merely a whim, no criterion, no conscience, no regret, and so Ethan drifted on, a silent predator in the starry expanse. With each new world he consumed, the universe trembled, but he alone reveled in the power of erasure. Ultron had long since become a destroyer in the eyes of every civilized species, a cancer spreading through the universe itself. So when Ego suddenly stormed his hidden stronghold and it obliterated everything without warning, Ultron's fury reached new heights. The invader didn't just destroy his machinery, he erased every scrap of data Ultron had ever collected. For a being who regarded information as the very core of his existence, this was nothing short of a catastrophe. Seething, Ultron immediately dissected Ego's powers and concluded that he stood a real chance in a head-to-head battle. Yet Ego seemed utterly unconcerned by any threat Ultron might pose, either dismissing him out of hand or simply underestimating his resolve. In his hasty retreat, Ego left behind faint energy fluctuations and a set of spatial coordinates. Ultron seized on these residual signatures like a hunter closing in on prey. With them, he pinpointed Ego's new location and prepared to teleport straight into the heart of his opponent's domain, thirsting for revenge. Ego's sensors locked onto Ultron's armada, and a silent tremor rippled through the living planet. Deep within its core, long-dormant energies stirred, gathering like a colossal, awakening beast. This was the power Ego had spent eons accumulating, enough force to shatter solar systems. As the energy swelled, the planet's surface burst into blinding radiance, outshining even the most distant stars. That searing light carried a promise of annihilation, a declaration to the universe that a world-destroying strike was imminent. Under that incandescent glare, Ultron's fleet looked pitifully small. But Ultron felt no fear. He knew that even the combined might of his ships could only bruise a world-sized foe. Thankfully, he commanded legions of cloned Saiyan warriors. Saiyans, channel your ki. Ultron's voice crackled through every comlink. At his command, the Saiyans aboard each vessel inhaled deeply, drawing their life force to the brink as they prepared to unleash their full power. A soft halo of energy began to shimmer around each of them, a tangible sign of their chi rising and a clear warning that an explosion of power was imminent. Ultron's eyes roamed over the ranks of the Saiyan army, his mind racing as he analyzed every subtle fluctuation in their energy. Chapter 1062, Ego Star God Form, First Celestial Form. The secret of chi lies in its frequency. Although chi fluctuates like unpredictable waves, Ultron, through countless experiments, has finally found a way to synchronize multiple Saiyan energies at a single, harmonized frequency. Once achieved, their combined chi becomes an unstoppable force. Every Saiyan's chi carries a unique signature, like a fingerprint. It cannot be copied or altered at will. To overcome this, Ultron deployed a cutting-edge device known as the Frequency Resonator. By precisely calculating and fine-tuning each Saiyan's energy output, the resonator gradually shifts their chi toward that elusive fusion frequency. When their individual energies align, they merge into a power far greater than the sum of its parts. Consider the sheer potency of Saiyan chi. A 2-digit combat rating can rip mountains apart or break oceans. A 3-digit rating can shatter moons. Individually, these Saiyans may not rank among the supreme warriors of the cosmos, but when their chi converges at the perfect frequency, the result is exponential growth, an energy surge capable of cataclysmic destruction. In the cavernous training chamber, Ethan stood at the center of a circle of Saiyans. Sweat dripped from his brow as he adjusted the resonator's controls, watching its energy readouts climb. Around him, his comrades formed identical stances, their auras flickering with anticipation. Each heartbeat, each breath, had to lock into the device's calibration. One misaligned pulse would shatter the resonance. "Focus your mind," Ethan instructed, voice steady despite the tension in his limbs. "Feel your chi's rhythm. Let the resonator guide you." Slowly, a low hum filled the room, rising in pitch. The Saiyans' individual auras, blues, reds, purples, began to shift, settling into a luminous gold. Ethan sensed the change in his own energy. It pulsed now with perfect regularity, like clockwork. In the resonator's viewports, numerical readings ticked upward until at last they all read 777.7, the designated fusion frequency. "Now," Ethan called. In an instant, the energies surged together. The chamber exploded in golden light as each warrior's chi coalesced into a single, roaring torrent. Cracks raced along the walls, and the ground shuddered beneath their feet. Ethan felt the power wash over him, filling every fiber of his being until he was no longer just one Saiyan. He was the embodiment of all their wills, all their might. When the brilliance subsided, Ethan stood alone in the center, his body alight with celestial energy. He had reached the first celestial form, Ego Star God. Every pore exuded raw power, the air around him warped with the intensity of his chi. He raised a single hand, and the entire chamber trembled in response. Ultron's voice crackled over the intercom, tinged with awe. "Remarkable. You've done it, Ethan. You're the first to achieve true fusion resonance." Ethan's eyes glowed like twin suns. "This is only the beginning," he replied. In the vastness of space, an even greater challenge awaited, and now, with the unified power of the Saiyan collective burning within him, he was ready to face it. Under Ultron's merciless command, every chi frequency resonator implanted in the hundreds of engineered Saiyans activated simultaneously, like the opening of a grand cosmic symphony. Invisible currents of energy rippled outward, weaving and coiling through space like celestial dragons. Drawn together by the resonators, these currents soon merged into a single, colossal vortex of power. That vortex behaved like a black hole, its insatiable pull devouring starlight. Any flicker of illumination that drifted too close was swallowed whole, erased from the heavens without a trace. At its heart lay a pitch-black void, an ancient, unknowable space rumored to conceal the universe's oldest and mightiest energies. Within this darkness, the individual chi of the Saiyans converged, clashing and intermingling in a fierce, ever-building storm. The result was a force of unprecedented magnitude, so potent that even distant stars trembled, and the very fabric of space quivered under its impact. Ethan stood on the command deck, heart hammering as the power before him swelled like a star on the verge of supernova, limitless, unstable, utterly destructive. This is enough to annihilate everything, he murmured. Ultron's eyes gleamed with fanatic triumph, as though he still beheld the instant ego's world shattered. From the far side of the battlefield, the catastrophic shockwave unleashed by the dying planet roared in. In the boundless dark, the two energy torrents met and exploded into a blinding conflagration, a collision so fierce it outshone every star in the galaxy. For a heartbeat, the universe itself seemed aflame. All other lights were swallowed by that searing brilliance. The aftershocks rippled outward like silent hurricanes, sweeping up stars and nebular dust into a spiraling vortex of chaos. Even planets light years away quaked under the sheer force, as if the very fabric of space-time was crying out. In that moment, Ethan realized he was witnessing an ancient reckoning, an elemental clash whose echoes would reverberate across the cosmos long after worlds had turned to stardust. Ethan had always been confident that his planetary shockwave could lay waste to any intruder. But now, as the titanic Saiyan energy cannon tore through his counterattack with overwhelming force, even he found himself unprepared. The cannon's blast cleaved through the defenses he'd erected around his world and hurtled unerringly toward his core. Deep within the planet's consciousness, Ethan was locked in a mental struggle, expending every ounce of will to purge the insidious influence of the Star-Lord lodged in his mind. Then, an alien force, cold and relentless, shivered across the rim of his awareness. He snapped his awareness outward, gazing up through swirling clouds into the star-studded void. There, carved against the cosmos, a spiraling vortex of searing ki hurtled closer by the second, the herald of the Saiyan energy cannon. No, they've gone this far, he thought, anger and apprehension twining in his chest. His senses, woven like an interstellar web spanning the galaxy, picked up every nuance of the oncoming assault. An almost insurmountable tide of destruction, advancing from the darkest reaches of space. Ethan realized in that instant that this armada's power was beyond anything he'd ever faced. A low tremor ran through the planet's crust as the energy vortex descended, its brilliance illuminating continents in a blinding flash. Ethan gathered every fragment of his cosmic will, preparing one final, desperate shield. Yet beneath his steely calm, a single, terrifying question pulsed through him. Could even his boundless might stem such a cataclysm? If that force strikes the planet Ego, its living body and protective shell will be blasted into nothingness. Confronted with such a cataclysmic threat, Ego has no choice but to set aside Ethan, the being dwelling in his core, and devote all his power to countering the external assault. In an instant, vast streams of energy surge through Ego's veins. He unleashes emergency protocols, directing his consciousness like a rising tide into every mountain range, every ocean, every grain of rock. Under his will, the planet's matter begins a radical, unprecedented reorganization. On the surface, land masses and seas pull themselves according to some hidden cosmic law. No longer bound by their original physical rules, they realign and fuse in astonishing new configurations. Invisible threads of pure energy weave themselves into a colossal lattice, forming the skeletal framework and meridians of Ego's reborn form. At the same time, the planet's own molecules reshape into living tissue, flesh and blood, imparting warmth and texture to this unfolding miracle. Within moments, Ego stands transformed, a towering colossus whose body rivals a small planet in size, pulsating with life and energy. Ethan hovered in the silent expanse of space, his pulse quickening as the void before him seemed to warp and shift. A monstrous silhouette loomed into view, so vast it blotted out distant stars, reducing the surrounding cosmos to insignificance. The Titan's entire form was sheathed in seamless purple armor that rippled with an eerie, arcane glow. Ethan's scanners registered 0 vulnerabilities. This shell rejected every probe of energy, every burst of particle fire, even the subtlest spiritual resonance. Its face, was little more than a pattern of glowing stripes and pinpricks of light, but Ethan knew better than to underestimate it. Those simple markings were an ultra-sensitive sensor array, capable of detecting the faintest disturbance in spacetime. Not a distant star's flicker, nor the slightest photon flux, could escape its scrutiny. Without warning, the giant raised its arms, and the void itself seemed to tear open. From that rift materialized a colossal warhammer, longer than the Titan was tall, born from pure sun-hot energy. It pulsed with a blinding brilliance that set Ethan's vision ablaze. A low, resonant voice echoed through the vacuum. "Ego Star, celestial form." The hammer crackled with power, and the armored behemoth Ego roared, "Come on!" Ethan's hand tightened on the control console. Ahead of him stood an unstoppable mountain of energy and steel, wielding a weapon forged from the very heart of a star. And in that instant, he realized the true meaning of hopeless odds. Ethan squared his shoulders and called out, "Show me what you're truly capable of." With that, the towering Ego swung his massive warhammer in a single sweeping arc and let loose a roar so thunderous it seemed to shake the very fabric of the universe.